Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2024 and subsequently episode 171 of the Warhammer 40,000 podcast, known across the internet and potentially around the world as Look Out Sir. My name's Dan, and it's that bit where I say, hello, Phil. How you doing, mate?
Hello. I'm here in the shed in sub-zero temperatures, wrapped up in multiple layers, keeping warm while the heater's not on. Basically.
Magical stuff, my friend. I have to be honest with you. I have to come clean as we start this off. I've not briefed you on the fact that I'm going to do this, but as a favour to a mate, I'm going to do something quite unbecoming. I'm going to shill for just a moment. If you'll permit me, a moment of shilling.
Oh, it's that time of year again where it's Beachhead Brawl. Is that what you're going to be shilling?
Absolutely. Noting that they don't actually have any tickets left for the 40k tournament that I will be helping TO. But Beachhead is more than just a 40k tournament. It is also a wargaming convention. So if any of you are interested in tabletop wargaming, which I presume you are, and you happen to be in close proximity to Bournemouth, and you fancy maybe coming along and saying hello to me, as well as many others celebrating all of this silly nonsense that we love, you probably should consider it. It's happening on the 10th and 11th of February in the Bournemouth International Centre. So there you go. Quite unbecoming, I know, but that was a bit of shilling there. There you go.
Well done, you, Dan. Well done. You've proven the listeners right that they knew deep down that's all you were.
Well, that's it. I wouldn't have said it though. Like, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't genuinely think it was actually quite a fun thing. I think it's I give up my own time, travel there at my own expense to help out and run the tournament because I think it is a good event and I do enjoy the community there. So at the end of the day, if I'm willing to give up a weekend and however much it costs to transport myself there, I may as well go all in and just chill for it here on my glorious podcast as well.
And exactly, you could have sold it as a meet and greet, really, for you, because I won't be there.
You won't be there. Why don't you come, Phil? You'd love it.
Travel and playing tournaments.
You can play some AOS. You'd have a lovely time.
I don't have the points unless they do 1,000 points solo AOS event.
Maybe you could partition them. Maybe you could host your own 1,000 point AOS tournament there.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe that's what.
Yeah, reach out to Pete from Entoyment and stake your claim.
This is what people need: low value stakes AOS where you don't need to pay too much.
That's it. Playing for pink slips. Get winner takes all.
I know. I mean, I've loved that as a concept because it's just mad. But
no, we wouldn't endorse that sort of silliness. But what we would endorse is the contents of this episode, which is, Phil.
So we are talking about the world that was, that has now been rebranded into the old world. So obviously that has launched recently. So we're going to have a chat about that and, what people's general online perception has been about how it all went down, and also the Christmas Day reveals.
Dark Angels specifically, very excited to talk about them, obviously. And all the other general Warhammer 40,000 topics are all wrapped up within the outro. But we can't have an outro without the intro, and this is now done. So we're just going to move on to a 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello, Dad.
What are you doing in here, son? What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Look Out Sir podcast, which right now, it's time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
All right, Phil. The records are set. We're back at zero. It's 20 24.
It's always at zero,
It's
Dan.
all-
It never changes.
It's a tired and utterly pointless gimmick, but we're too far down the garden path now to stop doing it. So, Phil, for the first time in 2024, where does this week's 5-star review come from?
I think you're going to do a slight curveball, so I'm going to go with our Facebook page.
Phil, I tried to make it so easy for you today. I was like,
was it just going to be Apple Podcasts of UK? Because that was my other guess.
Apple Podcasts of Great Britain, Phil. But I have to accept your first answer.
Half point.
No, I shan't. I shan't allow it. But what I will allow is this 5-star review from Arobo. Arobo has left us a 5-star review. Arobo 27, and they have written a really pretty decent podcast, 5 stars, which is, of course, Phil, as our listeners well know, a prerequisite of appearing here in the 5-star review segment. If you would like to leave us a 5-star review, we encourage you to do so, and are doing so now. So head over to iTunes, Facebook, Audible, other places where 5-star reviews can be left, and why not contribute and leave a 5-star review there. Additionally, if you want to be extra special and incredibly awesome, we do have a patron, and we really love and appreciate our patrons. We are continuing to do our best to continually deliver additional content. We just recently did the Primaris tier list, so that happened. We finally got that out. I'm working, Phil doesn't know this, but I am actually also working on a behind-the-scenes making of Christmas quiz video where I basically talk through the process of bringing it all together, editing and constructing it. So kind of, giving you a view into the method that is creating these sorts of things. I'd actually really appreciate it, if I'd thought about getting Phil to think about this as well, because obviously he contributes those great scorekeeper segments. So it would have been cool if we'd managed to get some sort of behind-the-scenes footage there. But maybe the mystery of the scorekeeper is left best as a mystery, wouldn't you say so, Phil?
Quite likely, although I think it's kind of obvious what it is.
No, Phil. It's incredibly.
Let's leave it. Exactly. It's the
It's an elaborate
Wizard of Oz.
It's an elaborate squid servitor with multiple human-like hands on many limbs.
You pretty much need that many to actually pull it off. There's a lot of moving pieces.
Well, you introduced an extra character this time, mate. It was quite incredible.
Oh, I know.
It's unbelievable.
I had to do something.
Anyway, but yeah, the point is obviously massive thank you to all of our patrons this year. We are really keen on hosting our first ever event, and we are looking to kind of make that available to our patrons, as much as obviously we want to try and make that open to other people as well. But, the goal is to try and continue to do cool things for the patrons. So, really, really appreciate if you're able to support us, that you could do so via Patreon. But again, equally, just listening is, good enough for us. So thank you to everyone who is supporting us on Patreon, and also thank you to everyone for listening as well. It's all good in the place we reside. And then lastly, there is merchandise. We might refresh that this year. Probably not, because we're so darn lazy. But,
Busy.
Is that what it is? Are we busy?
Always busy.
That's true. To be fair, it does take quite a considerable amount of effort to put this podcast out on a fortnightly basis. We can't be spending our time building new merchandise as well. It's crazy. But it's because of that lack of enthusiasm that you should definitely buy some. And that's all of the shilling. Beachhead, 5-star reviews, patrons, merch. That's right, Phil. That's all of it, yeah?
Yes.
Magical. All right, there you go. Let's get into this 5-star review then. So, a really pretty decent podcast, 5 stars. And if you needed reminding, this is from Arobo27 from Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. We do well, Phil, in the Britons. I have listened to this podcast since returning to the hobby in 2020 and have followed Dan's ups and downs relationship with 40K with interest and amusement. Being of a similar age, I started playing Warhammer Fantasy in 1994. I can really identify with his struggles to chase the nostalgic joy of these early years in the hobby. I find both Dan and Phil to be honest, genuine, and also very knowledgeable, without being overly serious about what is, let's be honest, a fairly silly hobby. I find it much easier to identify with and listen and to real people with real lives outside of the hobby than sweary American clickbaiters. There you go. There are plenty of those around, it's fair to say. And I really hope you can keep going with the podcast. Andy, I'll not say the surname for the sake of not saying it, but Andy, Instagram, Phil.
Oh,
Covert _painting. So, Andy, Arobo27, thank you so much for your 5-star review. And obviously, as is customary, you've left us an Instagram to check and observe. So we will do so. And that will appear just before the outro. So that will be timestamped below. So if anyone wants to hear our appraisal of this individual's glorious Instagram, we presume, tune into that. But no, seriously, thank you so much. It was a really well constructed, well written, podcast review. And again, obviously, great to know that we are kindred spirits potentially. That you, like I, am struggling with the ever increasing trials and tribulations of the evolving world of this hobby, and all of the yelling at clouds and remarking upon how things were better once upon a time that come along with it. But to elaborate on that is a man even older than both of us. How you doing, Phil?
Oh, I'm so old. I'm older than both of you combined, probably. Yes,
I mean, you're only like a year or two older than me. I mean, I feel like that's a little bit unreasonable.
A couple more.
You look so good for it, though, mate. That's all I'll say.
Oh,
so lean.
Thank you. Exactly. Arobo27, thank you very much. Really appreciate the kind review. Glad you're following Dan's ups and downs and you don't care about mine. That is brilliant. But also glad you're an old school fantasy player, as was I back in those days. So hopefully you'll actually quite enjoy this episode as we're talking about the old world. That'll be good. And I'll look forward to checking out your Instagram in sort of just the outro. That will also be awesome to see. So yeah, thank you very much. Very succinct, kicking off the new year very strong.
Absolutely. I think it's not that he doesn't care about your ups and downs, but that you're just such a level person. I don't think anyone from the outside looking in imagines you have anything resembling human emotions.
Oh, I know. I'm just a robot.
He's so dead inside. Until people rip off your beyond the tabletop designs, then you're like a wild man.
Oh. No, I know, but that's a different story for another time.
We'll chuck it in the outro, maybe. Anyway, cheers all. Transitional noise. All right, everyone, in this part of the podcast, we're going to attempt a segment where we talk about the old world, because lots of people have talked about the old world, and me and Phil wanted to do the same because it's interesting. Although, really, the thing that is sort of super interesting about the old world is less so the old world itself, but more the kind of general response to it. It's exposed every which interesting kind of polarizing opinion within our community, the wargaming Warhammer Games Workshop community. People frustrated at influencers because they get free stuff. Games Workshop's inability to keep stuff in stock, which ultimately is part of that whole frustration with the influencers piece. Then obviously hot takes on whether or not this game is even necessary or whether it is required, and why various things are happening. It's very interesting, isn't it, Phil, the old world? It seems to have sparked many debates, I suppose it's worth saying.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely stirred the hobby pots.
It really has. It really has.
It's definitely been interesting to see what people's reactions to it have been. And I think, actually, it shows you that it's probably going to be quite a popular system, because there was nowhere near as much content floating around when it came to Legions Imperialis. Like, some people covered it, some people got boxes, but nowhere has there been this online discourse in comparison to the old world. And obviously, the old world stems from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, so obviously there's much more history to it than, people liked it Epic, but Epic was never quite as big as Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So I can understand why there's such a big hubbub about the old world.
Yeah, I mean, just to state it from the outset, I mean, from my perspective at least, I'm really excited for the old world. I think it looks really amazing. I definitely didn't care about it when they first announced it. I was very much like, I'm not really interested in the old world. I'm very entrenched in 40k at the moment. And, we're talking like 2019, 2020 when they first kind of announced the existence of this thing. So at that time, I was
4 years.
Yeah. So at that time, I was very in deep with 40k. I really was specializing. But then obviously since then, I've diversified, started playing more Age of Sigmar, mucking around with Horus Heresy. I've definitely gotten to a place where I'm more open to more broad hobby experiences or more gaming experiences than just 40k. I think that's indicative of where I feel like 40k is at the moment. Not to say that I think 40k is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not quite giving me the kind of experiences that I'm looking for within the more kind of casual setting. Still love competitive 40k. Going to go to a tournament, in fact, next week. So, I'm still engaged with competitive 40k. Love it still. But, and again, hosting, or not hosting, but helping out TOing at Beachhead. So, 40k and me definitely are still on speaking terms. In fact, I really quite like it. I'm super excited about Dark Angels. You'll hear me talk about that later on. So, that's the thing. 40k is, to me, a great system. But to be honest with you, 40k at the moment only really, in my opinion, works as a sort of tournament system. And it's a game that I don't really want to take it seriously, but I think the systems within 40k can only be best expressed when played competitively because of the nature of how they've kind of balanced it. I think, trying to play 40k for fun is a bit of a, not wasted effort, because I think you can have fun with it, but I think there's so much stuff you need to do as a player with 40k to play it for fun that, you may as well sort of do away with that and just focus on clearly what it's sort of trying to be, which is more competitive, because that's really the only way the game works well. Whereas it feels like Age of Sigmar, games like Horus Heresy, games like the Old World feel like it's more akin to or more compatible with that idea of a more kind of casual, fun gameplay experience. Because from what I've seen of the Old World so far, and I've watched a lot of content on it, good golly gosh, there is a lot of stuff in the Old World. It's a vast game with lots of things, right?
Yes, I think it's jam-packed with special rules akin to Horus Heresy in terms of the complexity, I would say, which has a lot of interesting storytelling elements to it. However, in the defense of 40k, Dan, I'm going to say one thing. Casual 40k exists in the form of Crusade, and because you absolutely refuse to, get involved with that, I feel like potentially we're missing out on that casual play because you just don't want anything to do with it.
Now, again, we can get into a dispute about that whole situation, and I'm happy to do so. I will just say this in response to that. Crusade is a hat on a hat and ultimately should not be required for the game to be played, casually for fun. I don't understand how layering on an RPG system is making my game more casual. What I'm saying is that I think the system... Anyway, look, Jesus Christ. We're going off on something entirely different here. The point is I'm really excited about the Old World. I'm gutted that I couldn't buy it. At least buy it out of the gate. But I got to be honest, it probably has done me a favour. Honestly, I am really into the idea of collecting Tomb Kings at the moment. They look super fun, really great faction. I remember when, is it Pete Foley? Maybe not Pete Foley. It was maybe another guy was working on the army book back in 2011 when they did Tomb Kings for 8th edition fantasy. There's a really good interview with him on Games Workshop Studios YouTube channel, which was Games Workshop of Old's YouTube channel. I don't think it was Pete Foley now that I'm thinking about it out loud. But anyway, whoever it was, they spoke very passionately about the addition of the new plastic minis, the Necro Sphinx, the Tomb Guard, the monstrous cavalry, the snake riding guys. Really good interview.
The surfers. Mad model.
Mad model, but I love them. It's the thing. I genuinely am looking at the Tomb Kings, and I'm like, oh, I do love this, because to me, those Skelly minis are so iconic. They're so for me anyway. I just remember seeing those everywhere in my childhood. Right, people had those Yeah, because they used to go across multiple armies, right? They used to be in Vampires and Tomb Kings, although they added upgrade sprues to the Tomb King
Yes,
version.
I think so. Yeah, because I've got a bunch that I sourced on eBay ages ago, and I think even I just had some old ones from my childhood that I used in like conversion products, and they were just like the basic bare bones skeletons. And to me, they are kind of quintessential skeleton minis, and all the others since then have always been they've got too much guff on them. They've got too much like armor or gear. I just want literally bones and nothing else. Sort of Harryhausen style is what I want for my skeletons.
Absolutely. You got a boner for bones.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of nostalgia with the Tomb Kings. I'm not sure if I was like ever a huge fan of them as a kid or when they were about, and because I did play Fantasy. Fantasy was like my first main system. Like I played it before 40K. So I've got 2 armies, or 2.5, let's say, because I've got dwarves, which was my first love. I've got lizard men, technically twice, because I got lizard men when they first came out in, I think, 4th edition Fantasy, and then I got more of them when AOS 1 dropped, because I wanted some Seraphon, because I thought that'd be quite interesting. And then technically I've got some Bretonnians from, again, I think it was that 4th edition box where it was Lizardman v Bretonnians. So I've got those models. Plus I've got I don't know the names of the characters, but it was effectively the Robin Hood and his merry men metal miniatures I discovered like a couple of weeks ago in my collection. So I've got those floating around as well. So I've got a very small Bretonnian force. And I'd be very tempted to play the game. I was actually hoping to pick up the rules at the very least, but I didn't.
Those are still for sale, though, aren't they? I think you can still purchase the rule book and the army books. I think they're still available.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they're still available at time of recording.
Yeah, so on Saturday, it was just before 10 a.m. I was like, I'll check out the Warhammer website. I'll check out Element Games. And I saw Element Games had already posted a notice saying, we're not selling the Old World online because of stock shortages in terms of what they've been supplied by Games Workshop. So that was initially quite disappointing because I wanted to buy it through them because I've got a bunch of store credit that I wanted to use up, basically, because then it's like it's free money. I'm not actually spending anything if I'm buying the rule book with some store credit is the way I was trying to justify it to myself.
Yeah.
So I was a bit disappointed by that. Then I saw there was like a 40-minute queue just to get into Games Workshop to then see what they had. The prices of everything seemed a bit expensive. The book, okay, it's a rule book, so that was fine. But I was just like, I ultimately decided I was going to hold off from buying anything. I'll wait until I can buy it through Element Games, and I'll just do it that way. And I'm in no rush. It's like I would like to play the game. I haven't, as much as actually I loved the yeoman models. I like a lot of the peasantry from Bretonnians. And reading one of about the almanac, there's like a sort of themed army for Bretonnians that you could do where your lord and noble has sort of sullied himself, and he's no longer he's like dishonored in some form. So I was like, oh, this could be an army to build. I like the idea of that, but I don't think I'm ever going to do it. It's a great idea. Maybe I'll buy a few models here and there down the line, but I think the buy-in into the Old World is almost its biggest flaw, and that was sort of why it never succeeded, or why they stopped doing it in the first place, right? It was, to play AOS, I can buy maybe 20 to 30 models, and that could be an army, whereas in the Old World, that is literally one unit. It's quite mad.
Yeah, it's true. Just to clarify, the rulebook is not available, but the Forces of Fantasy and the Ravening Hordes books are available. So the 2 army books are available, but the rulebook is not.
What about those? What about those sweet card slips? Are they still available?
Highly doubted.
Because I discovered them much later. It's like the website is really awful. You go on and you're given a choice of Bretonnians or Tomb Kings to select, or Blood Bowl at the very bottom. There's a big advert for that. And if you go on to either of those, you don't get some of the generic things like the core rule book or the magic cards or the card sleeves. You actually then have to find them via the filters section. So, yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of those things are still available, but I think most of it's been scoured and, bought now.
Yeah, quite probably. I think definitely I can see it right now. The card sleeves are temporarily out of stock. So they're not, because they are saying that this stuff is going to come back around, right? Like, they're not saying that this is it and no more.
Gone for good. That's good. Yeah. And because we were speculating about whether those army boxes are sort of FOMO launch boxes, but they kind of confirmed, and the fact that they say temporarily out of stock means they're going to come back, which I think is really good.
Really good. Really good.
The price of them was insane, I thought. I
don't think so, though, man. Like, you get a lot of miniatures in there. I know people are, like, bleating about the fact that, they're old miniatures. But, like, the thing is, to me, is, like, you get a good quantity of them. Probably, I mean, in some respects, you get very little on these sprues by comparison, but you do still get a lot of minis out of it, I mean, if I was to look at, like...
You get, I think it was 1,250 points, or thereabouts.
That's what they're saying,
in terms of points. Yeah, so you do get an army, which is a pretty decent, sizable amount. And if you just look at the boxes in terms of like the sheer number of minis that's in it, it's quite a lot. Like but I feel like the price of the Leviathan box was around 110 or 120 pounds. So
I think Leviathan was more than that, wasn't it? I thought it was closer than 140.
Oh, maybe.
Again, I can't remember.
Even if you say it's 140, it's like they're all brand new sculpts. It's they've got the rule book in, whereas this is predominantly old minis. Yes.
Yeah, but they're single, like they're sort of push fit, single sort of pose things. Not that these are very diverse, but you are getting like, I mean, in the Tomb King book, you're getting that flipping big old dragon model.
Well,
like, I swear,
that's why he's
on its own.
That's why that box is 175 and the Bretonian one is 155. So it's like,
well, I mean, I purchased, recently I purchased Gobsprak for my Crawl Boys. That's £100 box set, right? For a man on a bird, right? Like, and that's probably, it's £100 for the big Gobsprak. Wow. In Age of Sigmar as well, he's like 260 points. I was like, flipping it, this is points per pound. Old Gobsprak's got something. He's a cheeky boy. But the point is, like, like big minis like this, like when this thing is sold separately, that'll be like 80 quid on it.
Well, no, exactly. That's the thing. When you start breaking it down and you go, okay, well, the rulebook's being sold for 40 quid, I think it is, or 35.
Yeah.
Then all the Bretonian Pegasus, they're like 35 quid. They're being sold separately. This is going off of the Games Workshop prices that they're now selling them at, rather than what they were years ago, for example. And to be fair, if you look at third-party sellers that are selling the original
but you shouldn't
minis,
I mean, like,
they are crazy prices. So this is still the cheapest way of getting hold of these old minis. Basically.
Yeah, but you shouldn't look at the old, like, people selling stuff that's out of stock. That's a different market, right? And obviously, this is obviously always going to be cheaper than like trying to buy Tomb Kings 2 years ago before this was a reality, right? Like if you were trying to buy a box of Tomb Guard 2 years ago, it was probably 100 quid for them or whatever it was. So like, but that's just an irrelevancy because that's a very different proposition from a commercial product that's being released on a regular basis and supported. But this is the thing, man. Like, to me, I don't look at this and think that's mad expensive. Like, don't get me wrong. Warhammer is expensive. I won't at any point deny that reality. But this doesn't feel egregiously expensive versus any of the other Games Workshop Warhammer pills I've swallowed over the years.
Yes, I think so. I think there was two things. One is the initial shock made me go, "Oh dear God, that's a lot." I then finally found a third-party retailer. I think it was like Firestorm or something like that, because I was trying to see what the discounted rates would be, and Bretonians was being discounted by £9, so less than 10% from £155. And then the Tomb Kings was 175 being sold at 165, So just £10 off. Normally you get a 10, maybe 15 or 20% off the normal sort of Games Workshop price. So yeah, for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's specialist games, it's not being as discounted as heavily. So in a way, it's like you might as well just buy it direct from Games Workshop, which is a bit of a shame if you want to support those independent retailers. So my initial shock was like, oh dear God, this is expensive. I think if they hadn't included the rulebook in those boxes, I would instantly feel better about it. I would happily pay £110 for that Bretonnian box plus £40 for the rulebook, even though the overall price is still like £155. I'd happily but just paying £155 for a box of models that includes the rulebook psychologically feels too expensive. But that's just the way my mad brain works.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I understand people who are concerned about the price point of it. And, you know, obviously this is a really boutique like product,
Game
right?
system.
Like this
I think so. This is
very
the
different.
Horus Heresy, I think, is how they're... I presume the target audience is people our age that played it the first time round. It's although saying
it's
that,
people like you, Phil.
I know, I did. Yeah, one of my friends who is, I don't know, he's like 20, 21. He's a student, and he was like, I'd have loved to have gotten to Old World, but it was just a bit too expensive.
Yeah.
So there are people that are new, or people that got into fantasy through the Total War game series that would love to get into the Old World, but maybe just a bit put off by the price point or the, you know, the sheer number of models that they have to do and like build. And I think that's, you know, my biggest sort of hurdle for wanting to do a new army. Like, because I love the idea of Bretonnians. But yeah, I just looked at that box and I was like, dear Lord, that is so much to build and so much to paint.
Oh God, I wouldn't go near the Bretonnians from a painting perspective. Like, they're just ridiculous. The thing I like about Tomb Kings is the idea that there's really good things about Tomb Kings, right? First of all, these old kits are a delight to put together. I haven't built one of these old skeleton kits in a while, but I did back in the day, and like, you know, I could build 18, 16 skeleton archers in the time it probably takes me to build 2 like modern Games Workshop sculpts, or like, you know, like.
Yeah, I've heard some issues. So shout out to, I think it's Chris Fosserin, I think is his surname. He does some YouTube stuff, and he got some. He's an influencer, so he got some freebies. He was talking about the skeletons and how the molds don't quite align up. So if you're super fussed about how they look, you basically, the rib cages on, I think, like the horses aren't completely lined up. So if you're really fussed, you'll be going and scraping or filing them all to sort of line up properly. But if you're someone that doesn't care about that fiddly little detail, you can, as you say, just whack them together really quickly.
But yeah, but at the same time, that's proper old modelling delight. And
that is true.
I feel like no, that is a bit rubbish. But the point is yeah, like, I think for me, I don't need excessive detail. And what I like about the idea of the Tomb King army is that what I'm thinking I'll probably do throughout the year is I'll probably just pick up the odd box here and there and build it. Painting it shouldn't be particularly difficult, because really all you have to do is get some, you know, bone spray from either, you know, any of the various spray providers, the people at Colourforge, for example, or Citadel or Army Painter. Whack them with the old bone colour, you know, paint the shields a turquoisey blue, you know, paint the spear tips and the spear things, you know, red or, you know, brown or whatever you want, and then just slap the whole thing over with some streaky grime or some other kind of muddy wash, and you're basically done, right? Like, I mean, it's.
I thought you was going to suggest skeleton horde contrast paint, because apparently that's would work a charm.
Well, yeah, probably through like an airbrush or something. But I just sort of feel like you're better off just rattle canning and bone, and then just putting a
wash on it. Yeah, probably. Yeah, do the old Army Painter dip method. Maybe. I mean, I've never tried.
Oh yeah, get one of the old dip pots. Yeah, that'd be all right. But no, like, I think that's the thing, right? Like, for me, I'm really excited about the old worlds, but then I'm in that sort of target demo, I suppose. It's sort of it looks really fun. It's got a certain like nostalgia for me, and it's cool that that they're supporting these sorts of systems and coming up with these kind of games. And the old world is never going to be a main game for me. It's not something that I'm going to invest silly money into. I think it's just like I'll pick up the odd skeleton here and there, get it all together, and maybe every now and again have a fun like game of something a bit nostalgic, or break out the old 8th edition fantasy rules, or maybe like the 6th or 5th edition fantasy rules and break it out. I think like at the moment, from the gameplay that I've observed on Old World at the moment, and I will admit that this is based on only Mini Wargaming and Games Workshop's own gameplay demos. I've not seen anyone else do any of this. I've only watched those two. It does feel very Hero Hammer, but maybe that's just how the starter box sets work. But there is this real problem where like the only things that were killing anything in both of the games was the big dragon and the dude on the Pegasus, and then everything else was just like, we're here too. It's like,
I guess it might be a thing of the game's really meant to be played at say 2,000 points, so having those big guys in a 1-250 does make it a bit more Hero Hammer than it should technically be. Potentially, it'll be interesting to see how the game will sort of shake out once everyone starts playing it with the other factions, or once I want to say Games Workshop, Forge World, Specialist Games Studio, whatever they're going to be called, start producing more stuff for the other factions. I guess it's a bit of a shame that there's the legacy factions that aren't quite being supported, and it's kind of fun hearing everyone's speculation as to why those aren't being supported. And
it's because they're all getting massive Age of Sigmar updates, isn't it? That's basically what everyone's saying.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense.
You got Skaven. So Skaven, everyone knows Age of Sigmar 4's Skaven.
Well, that's the big rumor. Yes, no one knows for sure.
No one knows for sure, but everyone seems to know that it's Skaven, right? So so obviously Skaven aren't happening, because they're about to get a massive range refresh in AOS and getting a big push in that space. Demons have kind of been under the, eye of Games Workshop for a while. It feels like Games Workshop don't like the fact that demons have that kind of cross-compatibility across multiple systems. So they've taken steps in Age of Sigmar to try and make demons a little less compatible with their 40k counterparts. So they've added a number of exclusive demons to the AOS system. And they've technically added a couple, if not maybe one, exclusive demon to the 40k system, that being good old Vashtor. So he's only available in 40k. And then, in conjunction with all of that, in the AOS system, they've created basically systems whereby all of the demons of each of the different Chaos Gods are integrated with their kind of human counterparts. So the Hedonites of Slaanesh are essentially Slaanesh demons combined with these,
like
Hedonites of Slaanesh human. Yeah, same thing with Maggotkin, same thing with Zinch. I forget what Zinch is called now. Why have I forgot what Zinch is called? Disciples of Zinch?
Yeah, probably.
Probably. Anyway, the point is that it feels like demons were always going to go that way. Dark elves were a surprise, but again, rumor is that it's probable that some Dark Elf stuff could be coming into AOS.
Some of Dark Elf stuff does still exist within the sort of AOS equivalent.
What Dark Elf stuff really does exist in the AOS? Because
the giant
now is
cauldron,
kind of the Altar of Cain.
Yes, that's the only one I can really think of off the top of my head. But I wouldn't
me too.
But it's an odd one, because I'm pretty sure, even Empire still has some old Empire minis, even though they've just had a recent range refresh.
There are no old Empire minis. The only old Empire mini in current AOS, as far as I'm aware, is the Steam Tank.
Yeah, so there's like steam tank, but you can still take the old dwarves and the old high elves and stuff, can't you? Under
Oh yeah, but they're slowly
umbrella.
writing those out, aren't they? They're slowly sort of like going, yeah,
Yes,
you can.
but I think if you were to, if the argument is, oh, some of these are still being used by AOS, then actually that's not quite true, because Empire still has that issue, but they've sort of resolved it, one would assume, because of the Cities of Sigmar sort of range refresh. So one of the factions that you still haven't mentioned yet is Lizard Men, and much like Cities of Sigmar, they've had a pretty much huge range refresh. Not all models, but most of them are now new style AOS, and the sort of, let's say, legacy fantasy style is mostly being relegated. But yeah, there are still some that are compatible, but to me that's still comparable with Empire and Cities of Sigmar. Whereas Skaven is all old models, but due to maybe have a range refresh. And likewise, Vampire counts, they've mostly had new models, they've had a complete new range refresh, but yeah, there might be the odd model here and there that's from the old fantasy line. Now, it might be that the aesthetic of these minis are still too similar to the fantasy ones. So Seraphon is a lizard men. They pretty much look exactly the same, but just a bit nicer. Vampire counts pretty much do, whereas Cities of Sigmar, the human side of it at least, has had a real divergence from how the Empire models used to look. And maybe that is the sort of the nuance of the difference as to why maybe some things have made it and some things haven't. And then the other two that we haven't mentioned yet is Ogre Kingdoms. So they are literally the old models plus a couple of new kits that they've done for AOS, and then Chaos Dwarves, which just don't exist whatsoever at the moment. I mean, there's one or two like Warcry minis that you could point at and go, "This looks like a Chaos Dwarf," but who knows? So
there's
maybe
there's little nods to the Chaos Dwarves in the boys.
Yes, and the what are the ones that were hobgoblins? They the slitters.
Yeah, they're the slitters. Yeah.
Yeah, so there could be Chaos Dwarves on the cut. I think they exist within the lore of AOS, but they just haven't done a faction for them yet. So hopefully they will at some point. But in theory, they are sitting on the old style big hat Chaos Dwarves and the Forge World like resculpts that they did a couple of years back. So they could bring those back, but obviously there's maybe something else. I mean, so there's the official reason that they've given for them is sort of like the lore reasons of these are outside of the scope, so dark elves and lizard men are too far away, although technically so are high elves. So, what are they doing over in the old world? Vampire counts are apparently too shattered. Skaven apparently have descended into like a civil war, so they're never been seen, but law can quite easily be rewritten if they wanted to write them in. It could just be a case of there's some technical reasons, like sort of internal reasons with studio why they don't want to do them. Trying to redo also all the ranges and do full support for absolutely everything might be quite a lot. So maybe they go, well, we'll do half now, and then these other ones will come down the line. They've called them legacy, but there's still a good chance that in 4 years' time they'd be like, yeah, cool, now you've got vampires, or now you've got lizard men because we want to do it, or because the AOS range is technically different enough now that we can justify having them back in the fantasy realm.
I mean, that definitely makes more sense, doesn't it? It makes more sense that probably what happened was, because you imagine, Phil, right? I mean, the team working on Old World wouldn't be small, but it wouldn't be huge either, right? It's probably, guesstimate maybe 4 or 5 people working on it. Maybe not even that, maybe 3. And they're probably like, right, okay, well, we can't do everything, but we can do a good chunk of something. What have we got to get in? And it's like, well, we have to have orcs and goblins because they're quintessential. We have to have dwarves. We have to have high elves. We have to have a death faction. So obviously we're going to bring back Tomb Kings. We're going to focus on Bretonnia as well. And at that point, it's like, well, what else are the kind of priority armies? What else do we want to look at? And it's like, well, Wood Elves are popular. Get those in.
Well,
Empire.
everything within basically. So you've got your sort of trifecta of the Empire, Bretonia, and like the Wood Elves, because they kind of live in that sort of Bretonian, that like core old world. The old world of the old world is the core area. Then you go, well, to the south, we've got the Tomb Kings. And basically, I think they've gone, we want Tomb Kings and Bretonians because they're the factions that we completely ignored when it came to Age of Sigmar. So they're going to be the ones we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
I'll do a slight mention now that they did talk about Kislev. Kislev was in the very first like developer diaries as like a faction that they're developing. So the impression that they gave was like, this is the new faction. This is coming out. This is going to be like the first thing we're going to see. They never said any of that, but that's the assumption people would make having read that article. And obviously there's been no mention of it since. So, hopefully still in the background that they're going to develop Kislev, and that's going to be something that's going to come down the line. Much like how they did, with Blood Bowl, with Necromunda, they gave you all the classic stuff, came back, and then they were like, and here's some new stuff that you've not seen before. So it'll be great to see that down the line as well. Yeah, personally, I'm a bit like they could have done away with the High Elves, because they could have gone with focusing on the old world and anything to the west. So, Lizard Men, Dark Elves, High Elves, they could have gone, well, we'll do those at a later date. But I think High Elves are so quintessentially fantasy, they've had to include them, basically.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? I mean, what's interesting to me, though, still, is this launch is kind of interesting because obviously it's supporting people who have these ranges, right? So if you buy Ravening Hordes or you buy the
Forces of Fantasy.
Forces of Fantasy, you can basically get rules for one of these factions in there. And, basically you're going to either get one of the evil ones or one of the good ones. Great. And obviously, if you already own a high elf army, then you can start playing with it. Similarly with other armies as well. It's just interesting the kind of rollout for the other ranges and the refreshes, because I was quite interested in the idea because I own obviously quite a lot of orcs and goblins through AOS. So I'm like, oh, maybe I could do orcs and goblins. But then it's like, well, it's weird because at this stage it doesn't. I'm not really sure what the vibe is in terms of when they're going to start rolling that stuff out and when you're going to start to be able to buy other stuff for those factions. And that's the thing that's kind of interesting to me as well. It's like, okay, are we going to see like a weird piecemeal release of some of these older kits? Are they going to focus on essentially doing bigger style releases similar to what we've now seen for Tomb Kings and Bretonians? Are we going to basically throughout the span of this year, are they going to go, maybe every month, every other month? Are they going to be like, cool, this time around, this quarter, it's now orcs and goblins versus high elves, and then they give us 2 new boxes for those, and then is it like, does that train keep on moving throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, but wouldn't it be great if they did one of these big boxes like every half a year? I think a quarter would be too much. Chances are you might just get one of these once a year. They do a double faction release, and then throughout the rest of that year, you're just getting extra support in terms of new kits. So there's more stuff we know from Bretonians to still come out. There's the Knights on Foot, which are the new minis.
They've probably got knives on them, Phil, I imagine.
Well, that's probably true. There's the Maiden on Horseback, for example. So she's a new mini that's still got to come out. There's the Trebuchet, which is an old model being redone, I hope, in resin, Forge World resin, as opposed to metal. And that was the other surprise. I was reading one of the articles, and it was talking about how we're taking the metal kits and we're redoing them in Forge World resin. So the detail is going to be a bit higher. And obviously it's resin, not plastic. Sorry, it's resin, not metal, so it'd be nice and light, easy to assemble. I was like, oh, brilliant. But then when I was looking at the online shop, a lot of the older kits, so like the Grail Knights, for example, are plastic and metal. And I was like, oh, so they're still keeping a lot of the kits as metal. And maybe it's only the larger kits or the characters that they're going to convert over from what was once metal to Forge World resin. Like trying to build that trebuchet in metal would be a pain. So hopefully that's going to be ported over to Forge World resin. One other thing, going back to a point that we made earlier when we were talking about the team being quite small and they might not have the capacity to support all of these, the extra factions that have been now made legacy. Like, the only counter to that is they've kind of done most of the work already. The free PDFs, if they are as detailed as what you get in Ravening Hordes or Forces of Fantasy, that's 90% of an army book. Well, maybe not. Let's say 60, 70% of the army book. Rules-wise, it's probably more like 80, 90. Because the only thing separating them is the future support that those are going to get. So one in terms of models and design, which is obviously a huge complex thing in itself. But from a rules point of view, it's the Almanac. And the Almanac has some special characters, a couple of like war gear items, I believe. And then there's different ways of building your army. And you don't need those to play. They're like optional play style. So for the 40k people, it's like the Warzone books where you had like your armies of... They weren't called Armies of Renown, were they? What were they called? The sort of specialist detachments that you had in 40k.
Specialist detachments, yeah. Or formations. I can't remember now. Which edition are we talking here?
It would have been 8th edition when we had the Warzone
8th
books.
edition.
And there was like the unique ways of playing.
Oh, they were Armies of Renown, yeah.
Well, they were Armies of Renown, okay.
Yeah.
So it sort of feels more...
They've had several Armies of Renowns throughout the different editions, but yes.
Yeah, so it feels like they've actually put in a lot of the work already from the core being able to play the games. And in a way, I'm kind of cool with that. Like, I'm looking forward to getting the Lizardmen PDF and not having to buy a single book to play them. Obviously, I'll get the core rule book at the same time. So I'll buy the core rules. The Dwarves, I sort of want to have a flick through someone else's copy just to see what the vibe is before I delve into the Forces of Fantasy. But yeah, Lizardmen, I can play them for free. Isn't that great? So I'll hopefully do that at some point. The other downside I've noticed is a lot of the miniatures that you think you should be able to play, you won't be able to. So for the Dwarves, I've got the king who's on the throne of power. So he's been carrying around. That's not in the game because he's a special character and he's effectively not alive at this time. So that is a cool model that I have that I won't be able to use. Richard was digging through his collection and I think he had, I can't remember what it was called again. It's the cool, like, tower on wheels with all the gunners.
Oh yes, yeah. The carriage with the basically the battlements on a carriage with the guys pissed on the handgunners.
So that's and he looked at because he was like, oh, I'll just have a dig through my old collection and I'll see what I have. And one of them was an altar, which I think is that there will be a proxy for.
Thing is, though, Phil, we don't know for sure if that stuff isn't going to be supported long term, because obviously when they get around to doing the supplement for those books, there's every chance they could add in that stuff. I think this is more what's kind of focused on out of the gate, because I mean within the forces of like the Tomb Kings, for example, there are characters that are being supported that you would think under similar circumstances wouldn't be. I'm not saying every character has been supported, but there are definitely some that are in there. But then maybe with Tomb Kings, the implication is that they're well old, so they still stick around.
So what they have said is people that kind of live for a very long time might still be around. Those that are of a very young life, like Karl Franz from the Empire, for example, won't be because they're in a specific time period. It was the Imperial or Empire War Wagon was the thing I was thinking of that Richard.
Yeah.
That's currently not in the game. Will it come out at a later date? Maybe, but it feels like it probably won't. And they've gone, well, that was an invention at a specific time period, and therefore wasn't around in this one. So is that just law that they've made up to justify a more technical reason for not including it in the game at this date or ever for whatever reason? You know, they might have deliberately gone, yes, all the characters that exist in AOS that came from fantasy, they're not going to be in this game. You're not going to see Nagash. He's not in it, or at least in his kind of current big form. Or will he? Will we see the sort of, the derpy old metal model? Will he come back at some point where he's got the metal hand and stuff like that? That would be quite interesting to see if they do. Yeah, I feel like there's a...
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think the answer to that question, well, the statement is yes, they obviously have come up with a fluff reason why they're not supporting that miniature. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be that they're looking at it going, right, okay, what do we want to focus on for this game out of the gate? What are we trying to balance against? What are we trying to do? Do we want to throw lots of stuff at a wall, or do we want to kind of create an ecosystem where there's relative sense? It's like, what are we looking for? Are we basically trying to create a situation where every army has loads of stuff, or are we trying to create a situation where we have to have some winners and some losers, but ultimately what we're focused on is we want them to have a couple core units. So, for the Empire, it will be, great swords and a unit of, of riflemen or pistoliers or whatever they were called, handgunners, and then we're like, right, we want some cavalry, so we'll give them some knights, or maybe, again, the pistoliers, like we'll give them that. And then it's like, they're going to have their griff hounds, or not the griff hounds, the demi-griffs, because that's kind of quintessential to them. So they got their monstrous cav, and then we'll give them a couple of characters, and that gives them a pretty good amount of stuff that we can work with out of the gate. And then when we get around to really faction focusing on Empire, we can go, cool, here's your battle mage on double-headed eagle or griffin or whatever it was, the thing that Karl Franz was on. We'll focus on that stuff. But initially, we're just trying to basically make sense of all of this. Because I think that's the thing, like, sincerely, the one difference I will say between the specialist game department and Citadel and the main Games Workshop studio is that they are, as a team, seemingly much more about trying to create more considered, well-designed games that support things in a more kind of, sensible way. And I think, to me, some of the decisions about stuff that isn't in there currently is more sort of indicative of their ongoing, approach to it. I think you have to look at it as a bit of a living game system at the moment. And I think for fans of the old world, fans of fantasy that still, played 8th edition up until, or still now, because technically the old world's not even fully released yet, but, those fans who've been playing 8th edition for the last 10 years, irrespective of Age of Sigmar and anything, they can still enjoy their game and their army with those things. And then the old world is kind of a supplementary element to that then they can start getting into and migrating to. Because the conditions of this game are so unique. It's like, basically, like, again, it's like if someone took 40k away from us at 7th edition, turned it into something totally different, and then brought back 7th edition 40k. If you basically... the same scenario would be that it's like if you drew a line at 7th edition 40k and you blew it up and turned it into what ended up being 8th edition 40k, but you called it Age of Apostasy or whatever, like whatever you want to call it, about, like, the Age of the Star Child, like, and did a thing with it. And then right now they went, oh, by the way, we're going back to 40k now. And it's like, those Primaris, sack them off. It's all mini Marines again. And, what we've been doing this.
It was funny. They weirdly did that with the Battle for Macragge release, literally just before Old World got announced for being up for pre-order. They're like, who would like to buy some old nostalgia minis for pretty much this brand new price that you'd buy the current minis for? And seemingly people have bought that, I would assume.
I think a lot of people bought that because they wanted the scenery, I guess, but also because, I mean, Lord knows, I mean, no one wants that tactical squad. Good God, that is an ugly tactical squad.
I know, but then people will probably say that about a lot of the fantasy minis. It's an odd one. I think in a way it's playing on people's nostalgia for both the game and the minis. But some people who don't like those minis will go third party or 3D print or use AOS minis instead, like their find alternatives. it's interesting that the game. I've always been saying, think of it like the Horus Heresy for 40k. In comparison, it's like the Horus Heresy of the Age of Sigmar, but it's not even that. It's the Horus Heresy setting for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. What this isn't Warhammer Fantasy Battle, because Warhammer Fantasy Battle is effectively the precursor to AOS. This is now the precursor to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, at least in the timeline sort of setting, which is why we're not getting a lot of minis come back. I think the minis that they've given us, like rules for, is all we'll ever see. Yes, they've released new miniatures down the line, but I don't think they're retroactively go, yeah, here's the Imperial War Wagon. Unless, of course, they're maybe going to... Because I think they would have given us the rules for it now if they intended it to be in the game. And I think they have gone... I would love it to be more lore reasons rather than sort of either internal politics or a technical production issue where they've gone, yeah, some minis we're just not going to have rules for support for now, but we're going to do it at a later date. I like to think that it's been well considered and that they will go, yeah, no, these things just didn't exist in this time period, so we're just discounting it, regardless of whether it would sell like bucket loads.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, look, overall, I mean, in terms of like wrapping up on just this particular aspect of this topic, which is the game and what they're doing, I really like what they're doing. I think this is the thing. If you're a hardcore, die-hard fantasy fan who's been playing, as I say, 8th edition or crikey, any edition of fantasy for the last 10 years, irrespective of what happened with AOS, and you've been playing Kings of War, if you've been purchasing, armies from like Mantic or getting your 3D sculpts or your 3D prints, fantastic, right? Like, and again, this is just another string to your bow. You're going to be able to continue to kind of use the system. You can probably take your old battle tomes from 8th edition and use the points, but then just, port that in, although it won't be so straightforward because the changes to the magic system are quite dramatic. But nonetheless, there is going to be some compatibility with that stuff, and you will be able to kind of house rule it. I mean, that's the weird thing. Like the point I suppose I was trying to get to when I said about the whole, they took away 7th edition and then brought it back.
Oh, yeah.
The thing you have to remember about 7th edition 40k is at that time, we as a community that was still playing 40k 7th edition was so invested in community-driven balance. Like at that time, the ITC, the fledgling ITC, was releasing comprehensive documents talking about how do wave serpent shields work? How does this rule work? How does this happen? How do we balance this? What can we do? Like the community was extensively fixing the game because Games Workshop weren't talking to us. So we as a community had taken steps to make the game better. And then that mentality was very much what was the situation when Games Workshop turned their backs on fantasy. So that community is still in that community spirit. They're still out there house ruling, comping, coming up with all sorts of stuff to make a near 10-year-old game system competitive and compelling today. And that's the thing. This community, unlike us, fact-spoiled children on 40k who have enjoyed, years of like love and support from this newly refreshed Games Workshop, we're now like, as a community, we're sort of spoon-fed our 40k gruel and we just sort of lap it up. Whereas this fantasy community are so much more likely to homebrew, so much more likely to FAQ and to innovate within their own spaces.
Because they have been doing it for, as you say, the last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah. As we would as well if the 7th edition 40k ideology had been left in a similar situation. But obviously, as I said already, we've been very lucky. They kept 40k going. It is what it is. But obviously, fantasy wasn't so fortunate. But it's created this really kind of can-do attitude within fantasy players. They're a lot more versatile, a lot more adaptable than their 40k equivalents, I would hypothesize. And I think to them, like, this is just a new set of kind of ideas and things that they can incorporate. And I do think that, the fantasy game, the old world game is going to definitely be more, more of a sort of evolutionary process and a kind of shared thing between the specialist games team and the community. Potentially similar to Blood Bowl, although Blood Bowl feels more like it's the Blood Bowl players just never being happy. But maybe that's true of Age of Sigmar, or not Age of Sigmar, Fantasy as well. But it always feels like the Blood Bowl players, they're like, it was best 20 years ago, whatever it was. They
when it was the living rule book. And
yes, yeah. I want to go back to the journals. What's going on?
The thing that everyone says is you always still can do that if you really wanted to. But I was saying to our mate Sean recently, like, if I was to play Blood Bowl again, I'd do the 2016 edition, because that was the edition I bought. I just was like, I can't be bothered with the new edition because they've changed a few rules here and there that kind of completely scrapped everything in terms of all the cards and the player stats and stuff has all been redone to the point where none of that's cross-compatible. Obviously, the models are, the board is, and dice and stuff is, but it's like, don't want to have to buy another rule book just to replay a game that I'll play once or twice a year. It's like, if I am going to play it, I'll just play that rule set that I've got, that I'd last played, even if it is, maybe it's more complicated because of the way agility works and stuff. But if I was going hardcore into it and I was going to play on a regular basis, sure, I would give the latest version.
That's the thing with Blood Bowl, though, isn't it? Because I felt like the 2016 Blood Bowl game was really good, and I've never been bothered with the newer one. I'm just like, yeah, all right, there's a new Blood Bowl, whatever.
Yeah, I sort of wish they had just Here's the thing, they made some good changes to it, and I sort of wish if they had done it, they just did it with 2016 out the bat. But I think there was a lot of hesitation to do that from the old fans that would have complained that it's too different from the previous version of the game. So I remember James Hewitt, who did that 2016 version, pretty much said that. So I think they were a bit more emboldened with, we've now got a bit more control over the fan base that we can now make changes and do another edition of the game. But at that point, I was like, I don't want to have to rebuy everything. I love what they've been doing in terms of like the Dungeon Bowl and the extra support, stuff like that. I would love to play that, but yes, it does mean getting them the new version of Blood Bowl to do that.
I have purchased Dungeon Bowl because I was just like, I have to get it because it's so cool. But like, I started reading the rules and I was like, ugh, what is all this? Like, why can't it just be like normal?
Yes, I mean, to be fair, I sort of felt that listening through some people talk about the old world rules, where I was like, oh dear God, there's just a lot of rules. And in a way, it's like we've been spoiled with some streamlined 40k rules within the 4 pages of AOS 1. Like, that as a design philosophy is absolutely fantastic. Really easy, simple, bish bash bosh. You want to pick up and learn how to play.
I won't defend all of it, but
no, completely true. But listening to the battle reports and the sort of deep complexity of some of like the universal special rules, where they're like, well, my mummy gets a 6-up regeneration save, and they're like, aha, but my archers have the braziers, which give me flaming weapons, which means you don't get your regeneration because it cancels it out. I was like, oh my God, that is such cool storytelling within the rule set. And unfortunately, you need a deep and complex set of rules, or at least universal special rules, to convey those elements. And I do like that aspect of it. But there's that learning curve of, oh God, I've got like 50 plus pages of rules to read through to get there. So it's, yeah, in a way, we've been spoiled with how 40k, like bullet points on 40k, is fantastic.
I like the idea that, like, say you and I would agree that, like, in a month we're going to play, 2,000 point game of the old world. Say we ever got to that point, but it becomes more of a thing where, you put your armies together, you submit them to one another, you read up on all the stuff, and you come together, and it's like a cool, like, day-long thing where you're just going back and forth, going through it. Like, I don't mind, like, that kind of gaming experience. Like, I love Age of Sigmar, and I really enjoy 40k, and, like, these are great games that I really enjoy, but they're very disposable. They're very pick up and play, and that's one of their great strengths is, like, you could come over right now and we could play some AOS and it'd be easy enough and just be like, whatever, AOS. But something like this that's a little bit more in-depth, I love that as well. And I think, to me, I think, there is a place for it. and I think it should be celebrated. I'm really grateful that Games Workshop have brought this back, because I think, you know, they as an entity, as a business, are richer for it to have this back in their range. And I suppose if we could just quickly talk about some of the other points, and we kind of introduced this topic about the idea that we would sort of talk about some of the sort of general responses to the old world. So, I mean, obviously there have been some people like, so first of all, stock, obviously everything is out of stock, and then influencers are being kind of, you know, pointed at again because they get all the stuff for free. And it is an interesting thing because I feel like in this case, like, I think the influencer stuff is really good for Games Workshop overall. I think Games Workshop benefit from influencers. And I would say that, right? Because, you know, technically I am one, although I'm not, because I don't benefit from any of the perks that other influencers get. We are a much more, we're a bit more of a pariah in that sense, aren't we, Phil? We don't quite get the same love.
Well, we don't get stuff 2 weeks in advance or however long it is, and we don't get it for free. So no, we're buying stuff, and you know, sometimes it's paid for by our lovely patrons, because you know, I would hate to have to buy every single 40k codex otherwise. So that is a burden covered by our patron supporters, which I greatly appreciate.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the fact that our patrons facilitate that for us. It's amazing, right? And we are very lucky that we have the support of amazing listeners who help make that possible. And I think, you know, a byproduct of that is that we have amazing listeners because they understand that we give, you know, our own authentic take on this based on our years of experience, but also based on, you know, the fact that we're not kind of shilling for Games Workshop, which I suppose is a positive. Not to say that we wouldn't necessarily be open to shilling for Games Workshop if they, offered, but I think overall we're happy with the way things are. But I think, yeah, it gives us a kind of unique perspective because we are ourselves people who create content, who put, you know, a podcast out there, but we're not benefiting from some of the perks that these other influencers get. And yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I can sympathize with the perspective of like the influencers, because it's not their fault that Games Workshop are sending them stuff and not supplying stock to people. But at the same time, it is understandable why people would look at it, because I'm looking at it at the moment going, oh, I really wanted one of those boxes. I probably would have bought one of those boxes if I could have done. And so-and-so's got it for free. But like at the same time, I'm like, you know, like at the end of the day, I'll get it eventually. And, you know, maybe it's a good thing that I didn't get it straight away because it means I can kind of temper my initial, you know, empty enthusiasm because I'm, you know, supposed to be, well, I am at the moment painting a bunch of Oryx for my Iron Jaws army for January's Age of Sigmar doubles. So I'm doing the Age of Sigmar doubles at the end of Jan, and I've got to get a bunch of stuff done for that. I'm really committed to doing some Horus Heresy stuff, so getting that built up and painted. I've got this new Dark Angel thing that I want to get done for 40k. So it's like I've got a lot of projects on the go. So adding these to the guys, I've still got all the Adeptus Titanicus stuff, not Adeptus Titanicus.
Legions Imperialis.
Got that to paint. Yeah. So, you know, at the moment, I don't really need another project. But
no,
yeah, I think there's two sides to the situation. It's not the influencers' fault that Games Workshop mucked up and didn't have enough stock for everyone. But I do think influencers do need to understand that, unfortunately, part of the deal you did with Games Workshop to get stuff for free is your fair game to a degree. I mean, obviously within reason. I say fair game, I don't want people to harass or to be unfair to people. I would never advocate for someone to kind of be aggressively ridiculous. But it is totally fair game for someone to post in response to someone's Instagram post where they post a picture of themselves with their free stuff to go, cheers. Couldn't get that. Thanks for flaunting it, right? Because understandably, it's annoying.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. It's the timing of it, right? So it's influencers aren't actually influencing anyone to buy this product because they're under like an NDA or they can't actually post anything until the day of the pre-orders, and the pre-orders pretty much sold out like instantly. So no one's watching influencer content and then deciding, I really want to get this old world stuff. Or if they are, they're then going to the web store and going, it's all sold out. Most of the time, I think what's happening is people are like, I know I want to buy Old World stuff. I'm on the website at 10 o'clock. I'm trying to buy it. I've been in a queue for an hour. It's all sold out, or I can't get the bits that I particularly want. And then throughout the entire course of that weekend, influencers are posting, this is all the, several £100 worth of free stuff that I've been given from Games Workshop. Thanks, Games Workshop. And it's the fact that it's happening after everyone's tried to buy stuff and not be able to get it. It feels like you're rubbing salt into the wound. And I think that's why people are like...
Sorry. It's extra frustrating as well, though, because a lot of the influencers, when they're not getting their 40k stuff, they don't care. And it's so obvious. Like, it's like there's a lot of them. Yeah, I
think it's a combination of some of them aren't really into the game system. Some of them are. I think also apparently none of them really got enough time to do anything with it. So
we heard
what they can do is, here's my box of stuff, or I've built a model. Yes, some of the bigger studios are doing, I've done a battle report. Great that they've done it. They're actually producing interesting content that is of value to watch. It's like you don't need 60, I don't know how many influencers there are, doing loads of unboxing reviews. Some of them, like Chris's, I found really interesting because he's an old school Tomb Kings fan.
Guerrilla Miniatures, you mean?
Oh no, this was Guerrilla Miniatures did
oh, sorry,
one.
I thought
talking about but no, Chris Fosterin, I got to get that right.
Yeah.
Talking about his Tomb Kings, and he was doing sort of build-alongs with his Tomb Kings, and he was talking about how good the sculpts were, or not so good, how the scale compares between the new miniatures and the old ones. So, for example, the old skeletons have giant heads, like their bone heads. Skulls are really big in comparison to the new Lich Priest's head, for example. So there is it's a scale creep, but almost in reverse, because everything's gotten sort of liver and actually technically smaller because everything's gotten more detailed, rather than actually just bigger. So the old skeleton heads are much bigger than the new skeleton heads, if that makes sense. So it's interesting to see stuff like that. I found that really useful. Ash from Guerrilla Miniature Games, he's done an in-depth talk through about the game. He also compared it to the older editions as a bit of a history in terms of where it's been, where it's gone. All great content. People just going, I've got some free stuff, here's a picture of it on Instagram. Not so great for anyone. That's not really adding to the discourse per se. I think that's why people have had problems with it. But as you say, it's part of a Games Workshop ecosystem.
Yeah.
We're well versed to seeing it happen for things like 40k when stuff like that gets sold out. If you are a new hobbyist coming back to the hobby, maybe the old world, you haven't touched Games Workshop since the old world. Then yes, this is a new rodeo for you to get used to. But this is sort of this is how the system works, so get used to it, unfortunately.
Yeah. But it's true though. I think that's the thing though. Again, I think any kind of harassment is not really. You can't really tolerate that side of things. But at the end of the day, it feels totally fair enough to point out that it's a bit frustrating that you're seeing someone who broadly isn't that bothered getting all their sort of free stuff, and then you're just like, oh, cool, thanks for flaunting that. But at the end of the day, they've got a contract to uphold. Games Workshop want them to post it, and they don't really want to do anything with it, so they just go, look, some boxes. And that almost becomes like the worst ones. It's when they literally just post a picture of them with their boxes and they go, way! And it's like, I got this. And it's just like, mate, it's so that's the worst end of it, because it's just and the thing is it's fair to say that in the case of Old World, it did feel almost a little bit on the excessive side of things, because everyone looked like they had it looked like a big old stack, didn't it? It looked like Christmas morning, and it was just mate.
Yes, it wasn't just the Leviathan box. It was one of the starter boxes, the modular bases, all the card decks, which are really rare because they, Specialist Games cards just go and then tend to never come back for a very long time. Plus, obviously, the almanac, plus the 2 books. So it's, it's probably a good 400 quid's worth of stuff. So it's quite a lot of things. You say it's like Christmas Day.
Yeah, and I think that's it, really.
I'm late.
And I understand also why some of the influencers respond by being all like, it's not my fault. I didn't do it.
It's just my job.
Like, yeah,
because it is.
Because it is, absolutely. And that's the thing. I totally get it. And I respect their perspective as well. But I'm just saying, like, I think in the grand scheme of things, I think in all seriousness, I sort of sympathize more with the fans being frustrated than I do with the influencer being like, oh, woe is me.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's ultimately it's Games Workshop's fault, but the visible face of it is the influencers, so they're the ones getting the flack somewhat unfairly. But I can sort of.
I think my campaign, my number one ask is my recommendation to all those ones is like, if you get it, maybe don't just do a picture of your haul. Maybe actually make some content. Maybe do the thing that your job is supposedly to do, rather than just posting the picture.
Yes, or because some people were like, oh, here's my mini or two that I've painted up. It's like, okay, focus on that rather than the swag photo, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously, I get it on that side of things. And then, there was some other...
Personally, I'd hate to actually, in a way, be contractually obliged to do
I'd hate it too.
with, like, the Bretonian box. As much as I would love it for free, as much as I would love those models to own and ultimately just collect, to then be sort of contractually obliged of, oh, you got to build and paint this stuff. I was like, it's hundreds of models. It's too much.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. Like, in the cold light of day, like, I have these FOMO moments where I'm like, something's coming out and I'm a bit gutted that I couldn't get it for free and because I think to myself, oh, look how Sher's a good podcast. We're doing all right. Why aren't we getting the free stuff? Like, that's what I say to myself when I go through this process.
Okay.
But then I go, actually though, I don't really want it. And like in the cold light of day, I'm like, good Lord, what was I worried about? Like, that's not me. That's not what I want. But like anyone, you have little fallible moments where you kind of your kind of principles kind of erode, and you just become driven by greed, and that's very much where I was at. With seeing like all the various influencer things going off, and same was the same when they did the Horus Heresy. It was the same when they did. It's the same when any big release hits with them. I go, oh, why aren't I included in that? But then I'm also like, oh, because I don't care and I don't want to have to deal with it. And I've got more boxes than I know what to do with in my house. I'm currently working through a bunch of stuff to sell off. It's literally like that thing where I was like, I literally, there is a kind of dopamine hit that comes from buying or getting like Games Workshop product, either purchasing it yourself or getting it for free. But it's all just work, isn't it? It's like every time you buy a box of something from Games Workshop, you're basically buying yourself a job. It's like
yes, that's why it's obviously people obviously refer to it like as a pile of shame, because it feels like you need to do something with it. Personally, I'm coming to the idea of, I like the idea that someone coined it as pile of potential, because it's something I can one day build, but I don't have to. And I think Jordan Sorcery, he does a great YouTube channel, shout out to him, he sort of just describes himself as a collector. He's like, I can build stuff, I can paint, but not very well or not very quickly. He's like, I like to just collect stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I like to just collect stuff too. I like to know I own it. I've got loads of like Forge World stuff in boxes, in the loft. One day I like the idea that I'm going to build it, but it brings me happiness just knowing that I own it. And that is almost what, the greatest trick that Games Workshop has ever done, is to make people buy more stuff than they can possibly ever build or paint. But if you're just happy just buying it and it being on a shelf and you get to look at it on that shelf, great. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. No, it is awesome, to be fair. It is awesome. If we're shouting out YouTubers, by the way, or like YouTube channels in the topic of the old world, I probably should have put this at the start, but number one old world content creator by far, Dr. Luke Baxwell. Get that guy in your cycle. My goodness, I love that guy.
Oh yes,
overacts to hell. Like his intros, I've kind of grown to love them. He did one recently where he did his most recent one was he did the controversy and countdown to release and battle reports, I think was the name of the video. In fact, I know that's what it's called because I've got it open in front of me to remind me of his name. And he did this opening skit where he kept talking about limited edition stag shortbread collections, and I was just like, I love this guy. He's won my heart, So yeah, Dr. Luke Baxter.
Yeah, he's very knowledgeable about fantasy. He's obviously a much, because I played it sort of, as I said, like 4th, 5th, maybe 6th edition. Maybe not. But obviously, I think lots of other people played it more 6th to 8th edition, and that was when I was much more into 40k at that point.
Yeah, if I could campaign anything, Dr. Luke Baxel deserves loads of free old world stuff. I think a huge percentage of my interest in this game has been motivated by his content. He has turned me on to it. It's fair to say. I think, you know what it was as well, because he did a podcast with Bard, old Bardic Broadcast.
Yes, I saw a bit of that one, but I never got around to watching the whole of it.
That was a masterstroke. That just basically anything the Bard does just drags me in. Like, he's one of the only people I watch on Twitch on the regular. He's always playing like old, like barbarian games on the, like the Amstrad and stuff. And then this guy just completely won me over. So there you go. Maybe he's a listener of ours, Phil. Maybe he's hearing us shout him out. So if he is, because obviously I assume that because he's such a great creator, he's obviously got to have great taste, so he's probably listening to Look Out Sir.
Exactly. Were there other controversies that we wanted to talk about?
Oh God, there was the thing, and then there were people talking about how they don't understand why it exists, or that like people being like weird about it in the general sense. Like there was a bunch of people talking about like there was one who was going on about like how it's weird that like clearly it's being set up to fail because Games Workshop haven't done like a full range refresh on it, which I thought was a crazy thing to say. I was like, why would you, like, literally Age of Sigmar 40k, all of it is iteration. Like you're not gonna do a whole new range. Like, okay, fair enough, they did that for Necromunda, fine. They did that for Blood Bowl, fine.
But you got 2 teams, or 2 war bands, and that was it. For the first few months at least, and they very slowly rolled it out. And we talked about it on previous episodes where it's like if you look at Blood Bowl especially as the standard model for how Old World will progress, Blood Bowl didn't have all the teams in like their new form playable until like 3-4 years in. It took them a while. They did like one team every quarter, I think, so maybe it was like 2 years. It took them a long time to roll it all out, and that will be the same with the Old World. We don't know yet, as we talk about, like how much support each army will get each year. Will they do a bit of everything for every army, or will they do all? I suspect they do all in on Tomb Kings and Bretonnia this year, and maybe next year it'll be another 2 armies. But it'll be interesting to see what they do over the course of how it develops. But as you say, it's got to slowly develop and drip feed content. They can't just be like, we're going to redesign Bretonians from the ground up and give you that whole thing. Like, even with the Cities of Sigma range refresh, they haven't redone absolutely everything. There are, as we mentioned, the Steam Tank, for example, old models. They redesigned a lot of it, but not everything. And I think maybe we get to the stage where the Tomb King sculpts that exist, that are like the old ones, maybe they will all get redone in newer plastic kits, but maybe not. That's not the point of the game. Maybe it is that nostalgia trip and an excuse for people to get hold of really old minis that they can't get hold of easily anymore.
Yeah, and I think you just got to also respect the history of these miniatures, right? Like, some of these really like iconic and really like influential creators, sculptors were involved in some of these projects. Like, like the Perry twins worked on loads of these like miniatures from fantasy. And yeah, sure, like the old skeleton horses are a bit jank, and sure, like there's some weird old stuff in it, but like it is cool. And I know that it's not for everyone, but that's also fine. Like, I think, but yeah, like statements like that were just really weird. And the idea that people are like, oh, it's going to be a failure and all this sort of stuff, are just like, I just don't really.
Well, here's an interesting fact. Like, Leviathan pretty much sold out, at least online, and then I think some more boxes came available. Horus Heresy never did quite sell out, I don't think, in terms of at least the new box set. Maybe the first one when they relaunched Horus Heresy, maybe that sold out. The Old World stuff completely all sold out. AOS 3 never really sold out. That Dominion box set sat online for ages. So if anything was, dead on arrival, let's say, AOS 3, statistically, either they produced way too many boxes, or it just underperformed, or it wasn't as popular as they initially estimated. But, that didn't sell out, whereas this did. So, and, obviously I reckon the print runs for these armies was being way lower than AOS. I assume that I would like to think that they were being very conservative in terms of like the numbers and that they were projecting to sell, and hopefully they've been blown out of the water. I'm pretty sure they said the same thing about Blood Bowl. They were really surprised with how popular it was. And I think there was a statement flown out. I got no idea how accurate it was, but they were saying it outsold the whole of Blood Bowl our first year, outperformed the Space Marine range, which is obviously their biggest seller. So that sort of took them by surprise, which is, potentially why Blood Bowl still gets supported.
Oh, was that the 2016 release?
The 2016 one, yeah.
Yeah,
apparently
that felt huge, to be fair.
Yeah, that apparently sort of blew out all expectations. How true that statement is, I don't know, but that's what I've heard going around. And I'd love that Old World does a similar thing, and the initial look is that it has. I guess the thing is, there will be an initial frustration if people want to get into the game but can't because the boxes or the rules aren't available. And if they're not available for like another 6 months, that's just going to kill people's enthusiasm for the game. But hopefully they'll be able to reproduce those boxes. There'll be new content coming out, and that will keep people's interest going. And that's ultimately what you need. That's why Blood Bowl and Necromunda have this drip feed system to keep people's interest going and sustain it as a business model. Whereas the previous editions of Blood Bowl and Necromunda was like, you got 2 years. They released the main rules, then they did a supplement, and then, a couple of years of support, and then it just waned off. And then they did another one. The downside, actually, is there's too much now. Like, every game system exists all at the same time simultaneously, so you can't build and play everything. Before, in previous years, there was 40k and there was fantasy, and then one year there was Necromunda, and you played that for a few years, and then that stopped and fizzled out. And then there was Blood Bowl, and then you played that for a few years, and then that fizzled out, and then it was even more time, or it was Space Hulk, whatever. There was only one of these specialist games at any one time, realistically, but obviously you could still play the other games, but they just weren't really supported. Whereas now, every game system is being played and supported at the same time. You're sort of sport for choice, which is a bad thing if you want to do all of them.
Yeah, but I think that's a very unrealistic expectation. I mean, I want to do all of them, but I accept that that's improbable.
Completely.
But, I think overall, I just think it's been really interesting monitoring it and seeing how people have, responded to it. I think, ultimately, I'm excited for it, as I keep saying. I accept that I'm not in a position that I will be able to play it, probably for half of this year, probably. But I endeavor to play Old World, and I think my expectation is that I'm just going to piecemeal put together a Tomb King army, build up 1,000 points, get them done, just, with smaller units, get myself some skellies, get myself a couple Tomb Kings, a couple specialist units, and not the big dragon. I may well end up buying that 175 box at some point, but even when I get that, the only reason I'm probably looking at that is because it's an efficient way to buy some of the skellies and then just get them built, and then look at building 1,000 point list. So as I can start just doing some little games and getting a feel for it, build it up slowly. I think that's the thing with this system for me is there is something truly iconic about some of these armies, and I miss not having fantasy games in my life, as it were, because
true.
I was always playing like everyone coming up in the 90s and the 2000s. 40k was always my main squeeze, but I always had fantasy as well, and everyone was always playing it. And a lot of my friends back in the day were huge fans of fantasy, so yeah, it's just one of those things. So I can't avoid it. I've got to get it. But at the same time, I'm loving AOS at the moment. I'm loving Heresy. I'm loving 40k. So I feel like, at the moment it's just not a pressing concern, but really keen to work through it and get it done at some point. But, it'll happen eventually. A slow burn, I think, is what I'm going for on this one.
Yeah, completely. I think I'll dig out at some point of my loft, my dwarves and my lizard men, just to tot up and sort of make note of what I actually have and work out how many points that is, see how viable it is to play some games. And I'll, I have no inclination of actually painting any of it anytime soon because it's all mostly bare metal or plastic. And I'll happily push around some unpainted minis just to try out the game. I'd like to buy the rules just to read them. I'd actually quite like to get the almanacs, just because they seem quite interesting. It'd be interesting to see what they sort of look like and like the content that's in them. One thing I thought about, actually, this game actually seems better designed for playmats now, because actually everyone plays with mats, right? No one actually does the old Realm of Battle boards or anything like that. But the fact that you just literally shoving around some movement trays seems like it will be a lot easier to do on these nice neoprene mats than on old flocked tables and stuff like that. So I feel like that's a nice quality of life we're going to see from this game. And then obviously there'll be the odd hill out styrofoam or something on top. I'm
going to throw it out there, actually, because this is something controversial that I feel like I needed to utter into the world. Have you watched the Warhammer World, or not Warhammer, but the Warhammer TV bat rep for fantasy?
Yeah, I really liked it.
Where those trees come from?
Oh, they're just third-party ones, clearly.
Third-party trees, Phil.
I know.
Third-party trees.
I thought that, but I was like, they look quite nice. They look good. They're not the old classic Citadel trees, the Citadel woods, which I kind of wish they would bring back because they are quite cool. Yes, I think that's the downside of this release, and it was the same with Horus Heresy. The specialist design team does not care about terrain. There's no Horus Heresy specific terrain. There's no Old World specific terrain. The Old World stuff does exist in terms of the old fancy battle line, and I would love it if they re-released some of that stuff, because it's like pulling teeth trying to find that online for even if you had deep pockets. They're just rare, right? There's hen's teeth, as people say. So I would love it if they brought back some old stuff. I guess fancy, sort of a bit like when we were sort of saying with Imperialis, that you could probably get away with playing with little terrain or not needing as much. People say it about AOS as well to an extent. So maybe that's why they haven't produced any terrain just yet, and it's just people's models that they're giving us now. But I'd love them to do some terrain. That'd be cool to see.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, those old houses that they've got, there are some incredible 3D printed terrains out there. There was Weta Studios or Weta Works, whatever they are, the studio people at Weta. One of the guys from Weta did a fantasy tabletop
the modular
thing.
It was like, so was it like Hobbit Kingdom or something? A bit
it
not
was,
actually,
it was
Lord of the
fun.
Rings Hobbit, but yeah. I know the one.
But anyway, there's some really good stuff you can get out there. But I quite like the look of all that stuff. I like the idea of like, I as much as I agree with you, the neoprene mat stuff does make sense. I still also really love when you see like the proper flocked boards and stuff. Like for me, you got to play it on an old battle.
Yes, although I imagine models on movement trays will be sliding down those hills, and all the models will be falling over everywhere. So I imagine that aspect won't be very nice. But on the flats, or you're either on the hill or you're off the hill, and there's no in between, that might be fine. I think that'd be a good way to do it. I think, and it would be a classic, clunky dice rolling around, rattling on them. Would look good.
Yeah, I'm dead in favour of that. But no, it was just weird to see because I looked at those trees and I was like, I swear those are like from from Battlefield in a Box or something of that ilk.
Or like train sort of model scale trees, probably that sort of vibe. 100%. That's where they're from.
It shocked me. It shocked me to see. Anyway, look, there you go. That is us talking about Old World and all of the associated topics. Obviously, not really a great deep dive into the game systems. Definitely recommend other YouTubers for that, particularly Mr. Dr. Baxel. But yeah, as I say, it's been a delight talking about it. Really excited for it. We'll probably not talk about it again for the foreseeable, but
yes, we get our hands on the book.
Well, exactly. It's been a really interesting release, though, and definitely an interesting insight into the overall kind of Games Workshop-ness of things at the moment. So hopefully you found it entertaining. Apologies for our 40k fans who are thinking to themselves, where's the 40k content at? Well, it's coming now. So transitional noise. All right, now we got all that old world chat out of the way. Let's talk about Warhammer 40,000 by Cracky. Specifically, Phil, my favourite non-controversial topic. Dark Angels, baby! How exciting, eh?
Ooh, yes, fancy that. Aren't you glad you got a Christmas Day treat?
Mate, for me, it was a treat, to be fair. There are two things I quite like in the world of Warhammer 40,000. Terminators and Dark Angels. So, Dark Angel Terminators, whoopee-doody-doo. Because, obviously, the thing that's super cool about the new 10th edition Space Marine range is the new Terminator kits. They are probably the bestest thing about 10th edition Space Marines. I know some of you will be going, but damn, what about the Assault Intercessors with jump packs? Come on now. Don't be ridiculous.
No, of course not.
No, not even close. I will, to be fair, the companions, the heroes, the command squad, pretty nice. I can probably see myself around to saying that the command squad looks pretty, but overall, it's the Terminators, right? They're the stars of new Space Marine range.
That is true. And, this segues nicely into plugging. We have on Patreon a Primaris tier list video where we rank all the Primaris models, excluding the 10th edition stuff. So maybe we'll get around to one day doing a 10th ed one where we can talk about the Terminators, we can talk about the Command Squad and rank how all of those fit. And I think it's fair to say that the Terminators will be bang at the top.
Oh, mate. I think the thing is in photography, they're not really done justice. I think it's the scale of the minis that just really make them come to life. They're just so well formed in 3 dimensions. The way they look, the presence, the weight of them. They're just fantastic. I genuinely am dead happy with them. I think they're great. And obviously, seeing now that we're going to get these upgrade kits for the Dark Angels is really cool. And then obviously there's the Deathwing Knights as well, which just look phenomenal. And the box set is just great, in my opinion. I'm very excited. But, the most Terminator-y of Terminators can only be the Master of the Deathwing, good old Dave Bautista? I don't know. Belial, that sort of looks like Dave Bautista, at least in the face. But yeah, Belial, to me, this Belial sculpt absolutely knocks it out of the park. I think this is I think the Terminator Captain sculpts have all been amazing, and I think this guy, again, is just phenomenal. My only regret is that we don't have, or at least we don't appear to have, a helmeted version of the character. I would have liked to have seen him wearing a helmet. And maybe that's still an option because, sometimes they like to surprise us like that. But
that's true.
The fact that he's only available hooded.
I guess it wouldn't be too difficult to use different helmets. So I'm just trying to think. There are a couple of helmets in the upgrade set that you could potentially use. Obviously, they're not super ornate or fancy. They're kind of standard-ish Terminator helmets. But yeah, there might be a third option as well in the kit that we've just not seen.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, right? But, I mean, all that being equal, though, I think this guy just looks phenomenal. Obviously, he's got just this incredible presence. His Storm Bolter, that, like, relic Storm Bolter that he's wielding just has so many, like, interesting little design cues to it that really makes it very unique as a piece. I love the almost Imperial Guard-esque Aquila with the skull that he's got on it. It's very it's a very interesting Imperial Eagle that he's got on that. That
That's
bolter.
true. I did see. I think there was some speculation because I think the bolter had been previewed in the rumor engine.
It had, yeah,
Christmas rumor engine. So people were saying it was Commissar Yarek's.
Mm.
Although I think Yarek's had, I want to say it had a laurel wreath on it. I can't 100% remember. Maybe it did have the Imperial, the sort of the skull and wings. That is a particular guard thing often, but I think it does mean something else. So yeah, not Yarek. Fair enough. Yeah, it's got a cool, like, old style bolter. I like it. Overall, I don't know. It doesn't wow me, but then I'm not a Dark Angels person.
I think it will. I think this is one of those ones that when you see it on the tabletop, it'll really, like, when you see it in 3 dimensions, I'm pretty confident this will really hit hard, because I think all the Terminator Captain kits all look like, feel to me like
that is true.
Yeah,
they've all looked pretty good so far. Yeah, I think overall looks good. I think it's better with the hoods, I want to say. Where it's slightly less Dave Bautistery. It's got some really nice touches, like the grill on the back of the sort of Terminator is sort of like ornate and churchy, off to confession sort of vibes to it. So, they've got some really nice touches in it. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on what I initially thought I didn't like about it, but yeah, I mean, it does look good.
I think it's a really great centerpiece, and I think at the end of the day, Belial is a character that definitely has earned his place in the broader kind of world of Warhammer 40,000. He first introduced a Belial sculpt in. I want to say they first introduced the Belial sculpt in 6th edition. Maybe Belial was introduced as a concept before then. But yeah, all the same, I just think, again, really cool character, really great sculpt, really feels like a great centerpiece for a Dark Angel army, something that, is going to look really great. And again, you could very easily see this guy striding alongside the Lionel Johnson sculpt. I think this guy does a lot of what you want them to do. Like Asmodai, unfortunately, by comparison, felt way too cartoony. Like Asmodai didn't quite hit the right notes in the same way. I think it's still going to be a really nice miniature when you see it in reality, but there was something a little bit over the top and kind of odd about the Asmodai sculpt. Like, I think there was a lot of good elements, but I think overall the Asmodai sculpt didn't give us what we were looking for, or at least what I was looking for.
Chaplain one.
The Chaplain one, yeah. Yeah, Asmodai is still fine in my opinion, but he's not, he's not the best. Whereas Belial, I think, just sort of brings it all home. And I think this is, I honestly can't really say anything other than great things about it. I think, I'm going to be dead impressed to see this guy in 3 dimensions. I don't think for a second that he's going to take the top spot of Space Marine character miniatures. That is still very much High Marshal Helbrick's remain. High Marshal Helbrick is a hell of a, it's going to take a big effort to dethrone Helbrick, at least for the foreseeable. But Belial here looks phenomenal. And again, really exciting that we're getting not just Asmodai, but we're also getting Belial. I would have loved them to do Ezekiel. Hopefully, maybe, possibly, fingers crossed, there is an Ezekiel sculpt waiting in the wings because at the moment, if Ezekiel isn't getting a sculpt, it's going to seem pretty absurd because, like, Ezekiel is like the oldest character that they've got in their range now. So like Azrael got updated, Asmodai got updated in 6th edition, so he wasn't even that old. Belial got introduced in 6th edition. So now basically in terms of like Dark Angel characters, you've got Samael, which I believe was at least the jet bike sculpt was introduced in, I want to say 5th edition. The Samael sculpt came in, and it might have been 4th edition potentially. But the Samael jet bike's relatively old, but not as old as Ezekiel. Ezekiel was like in the original Rogue Trader days, like, or not Rogue Trader, but like 2nd edition 40k was when like the Ezekiel sculpt came into being, and it's still available now. So yeah, Ezekiel's done his time, right? So yeah, hopeful that we get a new Ezekiel. But anyway, look, all things being equal, Belial's looking good, in my opinion, and I think it's a really promising sign for this Dark Angel release, in my opinion. Any thoughts from your side, Phil, on Belial before we move on to the next bit?
In the space that we've been talking, he's been growing on me. Put it that way. I like the pose of him. I kind of like the flames, even though I know a lot of people aren't a fan of like elements or elemental effects. I think it's just for sort of the hood and the bare heads that I don't know. I'm not sold on, but I'm not a Dark Angels player. Hooded people aren't really my jam. But yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good.
Fair. So next along, we have the Inner Circle Companions, not to be confused with the Deathwing Companions from Horus Heresy, although I imagine the name was done to evoke that idea. This is...
Not to be confused with Blade Guard either.
Not to be confused with what, sorry?
Blade Guard.
Sorry, mate, you're going to have to say that again. Your signal is so bad.
Not to be confused with Blade Guard.
No, not to be confused with Blade Guard at all. This is an entirely original idea. Although, to be fair, they're more akin to the Sword Brethren, I suppose, than Blade Guard.
I guess so. But they do have an ancient, like, sort of banner standard bearer, much like the Blade Guard. Although, yes, you're right. The Blade Guard have shields, and these guys don't. So, yes, a bit more like the Black Templars.
Yeah, they definitely have more in common with the modern command squad than the Blade Guard necessarily. But look, it's no great secret, right? That I'm going to shock people now, but this is obviously the Risen, right? Like, this is the Risen squad. They're just not calling it that. They're calling it the Inner Circle Companions, and they're basically going, yeah, these guys mysteriously appeared when the lion appeared, and they don't say very much, and they're very secretive, and they've got this mysterious cross key symbol on them. What's that all about? Which again is all part of the circles within circles and the whole kind of construction that is the Dark Angel. So normally the symbol of the cross keys is basically a sign that you are kind of able to access the armories of the Dark Angel, so you're able to utilize some of the more devastating technologies from the Dark Age of technology. So this is obviously, again, linked to other symbols and other things, because, again, Dark Angels use all sorts of layers and symbolism to kind of communicate within themselves. But, yeah, basically, during the events of the Lion returning, he became super friendly with a bunch of Fallen that he decided he got on all right with, so they became Risen, and then those Risen somehow miraculously become Primaris. Fine, whatever. Primaris isn't a thing anymore. No one cares. But they are Primaris, although one of them's got, a standard old school Space Marine
yes.
grill.
Although weirdly, isn't it a Mark 7 grill which would sort of be too new for the Fallen. Well, actually, no. I think maybe some Chaos did have that kind of style as well, actually. So maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it depends, right? Because it depends when they came out of the warp, because a lot of the Fallen or the Risen or whatever you want to call them would have been scavenging gear from, other Marines.
Yeah,
that
fair enough.
Counted.
That is true.
So, it's entirely probable that this guy would have murked one of the, Dark Angels pursuing him and then taken his helmet.
And he's still wearing it now. I didn't really clock that these are probably the Risen. But yeah, fair point. They may well be. I would have personally liked more Risen in their old school armor, but then you get the issues of, are we going to do true scale Space Marines alongside Primaris? Let's just make them all Primaris. So yeah, that'd be quite interesting. Interesting to see, lore-wise, what they say they actually are.
They'll never describe it anymore, because the thing is, right, is like, the thing that's going to happen now is basically the Risen did a bunch of stuff with, Lionel Johnson during the events of the Son of the Forest or Lion of the Forest, whatever that book was called. They went on a jolly fetch quest and did their thing and, fought some demons and had a lovely time. And, all of that happened. And then, then in the events of the Lion, when the Lion kind of reconnected with the Dark Angels, fought against Angron, the Risen were there, but they were kind of all secrety. And it's sort of now a weird thing, because the implication is that basically the Risen have been folded into the ranks of the Dark Angels by, the decree of Lionel Johnson. He turns up and goes, "Oh, these are my mates. They're just going to chill out and hang out with us." And it's like, oh, okay. And they're the Risen. But now they're like, again, according to this, they just don't talk to anyone. They just keep themselves to themselves, and they're super quiet. And yet again, modern Dark Angel lore. Yet again, the Dark Angels don't question it, right? The most inquisical and most vigilant and most kind of driven kind of faction to seek out and, purge chaos and do all the rest of it, right? Like the Lions rocked up and they're like, "Where's the Lion in it?" I mean, it's all good.
Well, exactly. If your Primarch comes along and says it, you kind of got to, unless people are going to be questioning.
Yeah.
It would be interesting, and maybe gets covered in a Black Library book where people are like, "This Primarch doesn't seem he's changed."
But that would be really interesting, and that's the thing, because to me, like, the Dark Angels should be looking at these guys and being like, right, so what's up with these guys, and why is the Lion so old, and what is happening? I mean, immediately they can obviously explain away the old stuff because he is old, because he's been around for ages, blah blah blah. But it's that thing where you can start questioning things, and that you could do interesting layering and storytelling around this stuff. But it always just sort of feels like there's just this stuff sometimes, and it seems to consistently happen with Dark Angels. Although maybe it's because I'm a bit too invested in their lore. It feels like with Dark Angels more than ever, they just make them. It feels like the people who are working on Dark Angel stuff don't get the point of what they are, and they always seem to just keep going, "Oh yeah, they just accept that." Like Primaris Marines, "Oh yeah, they just accept them." These guys, "Oh yeah, whatever."
If they didn't, then the lore would never progress. So they couldn't give them Primaris, they couldn't give them this new unit, because technically, lore-wise, they'd be like, "Wow, we don't want that." And then they'd be stuck still being the Firstborn Marines, which, interesting from a lore point of view, not very great if you want to buy all the new minis that every other Space Marine chapter's getting. So they've just got to sort of brush it under the carpet a bit.
Well, they could have just done,
like, yes, that's fine.
Wouldn't it have been great, though, if they had just gone, "Here's the Azrael sculpt, and he's not Primaris, he's just a true scale Azrael." You know what I mean? Like
so some stuff like that would be good. I think, obviously they're sort of doing nods and winks here and there. So, with these companions, some of them have older Mark helmets. And I think after the initial release of all Primaris, where it's like all new Mark armor, they're starting to be like, people can mix and match. And we're seeing some of the old style helmets. Although personally, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like those grill helmets are really dated. And I just don't like them, and I don't like the look of them on the Primaris Marines. I think maybe I'm just so used to the new sort of style Primaris helmet, which is admittedly a bit more Mark IV, I want to say, style. So yeah, that's my preference for Space Marine helmet.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But I think overall, I think this unit is definitely one of the low points for this Dark Angel release. I think there's a lot of really great elements, and I think they're going to look really good on the tabletop once you kind of get them built and so on. But for me, it's like, it's just, I think like the Risen story just hasn't hit right for me. And having a unit of Risen in your army is fine, I guess, on the basis that, you know, they're buddies with the Lion and all that good stuff. So whatever, like that they get a pass. But like, again, it's just, it's the nature of these sculpts, really. It's like, I think they are good, but they are just a little bit over embellished. It's like they got robes on top of robes, and they've got all this smoky stuff going on, and like, you know, the posing is a bit weird, and like I just don't think it's a home run, these guys. I think there's a lot left to be desired.
I agree. I was trying to put my finger on it, and I think the robes, for whatever reason, especially the lower half, almost just make them look too squat or out of proportion, because you don't see any of the legs whatsoever. You're just seeing these like shapes, and I'm sure it's accurate and I'm sure it's correct, but it just feels like they're too top heavy, and that might be because they've got, you know, their normal armor plus like the robes on their arms and stuff, plus all these embellishments, plus giant swords, plus smoke coming out the sensors on the backpacks. But yeah, they just don't seem to work. And, you know, personally, like I've said before, Dark Angels aren't for me. I like Space Marines to be like really minimalist and sort of utilitarian. So that's why the Primaris stuff's always really appealed to me more than this, which is much more like, you know, 7th Ed Firstborn Space Marines, where it's like they're veterans, they're covered in purity seals, they've got lots of dangly stuff on their belt. And while that can look cool, personally, I'm just not really that drawn to it. And yeah, this is quintessentially Space Marines that I don't like.
No, that's fair. That's fair, mate. I it's difficult to defend them, to be fair. I think they're fine. Like, to me, the Deathwing companions from Horus Heresy are perfect. Like, they, to me, is like one of the best representations of a kind of veteran squad that you can have.
Have they got the helmets with the sort of the like hussar wings on them?
Yes.
On the yeah. They're brilliant.
Yeah.
They're much
They're
more
incredible.
nicely. They sort of lean into that kind of medieval aesthetic, which I think actually works really well for Dark Angels. Whereas, I think robes is such like a trope and a meme for Dark Angels that it just leans into it. If that's all you see is Dark Angels, it's, you know, when people go Krieg, they just think of shovels. It's like, you know, just don't make minis with loads of shovels on, please. It's like, yeah, as you say, if they had done companions and they had done a different aesthetic, it's like that would work better, I think, rather than just playing into the necessary like tropes of your chapter. So yeah, I think you've got a good point there with the Horus Heresy ones.
Yeah, the banner looks cool, though. I'll give the banner a good old thumbs up.
I'm not a fan of it. It's weird. I mean, it'd be interesting to see in 3D, but it feels like the wings surround the
they're
whole
folded
statue in the middle.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool conceptually, but I don't think it looks good. But, you know, we always say we reserve judgment until we see the final models. And, you know, the 3D version might look a lot better, but yeah, I just sort of don't like how it looks in the photos, at least.
That's fair. And again, though, it does seem like there's a lot of variety in terms of the sculpts within the kit, because by all accounts, this is a unit of 3, maybe 4 guys. But there does seem to be a lot of variety in terms of how you compose them and put them together. So I do think overall it'll be a perfectly serviceable kit. I will struggle to find a reason to buy these guys.
I was going to say, would you buy them? Yeah,
I don't know. I think Here's the thing, right? If they enter into a situation where there's a really good synergy between these guys and the Lion, basically, if they give me a compelling gameplay reason to buy them, I'll buy them because I will prioritize their gameplay function over their aesthetic. But, it really will have to come down to they're a quintessential unit that I need to have because they are that much better than, say, Blade Guard or, Deathwing Knights, etc. They'd have to be demonstrably better, and then I buy them just because gaming. But
yes, I imagine they will have some kind of was it like bodyguard rule for Lionel Johnson?
Yeah, they're all in if they've got some kind of synergy with the Lion, then already you're like, oh, okay, I get it. They're going to be good. So yeah. But then the last thing, and the thing actually really the most interesting thing that they've done for this, and it's interesting, right? Because it wasn't in our tier list, but we didn't we? Like a couple of episodes ago, we did a predictions on like what's getting discontinued or what's happening with Space Marines and all 40k factions, like what miniatures are going to get removed, essentially. And one of the predictions we made during that is that we're going to be moving into an upgrade sprue era where a lot of old stuff is going to get discontinued in favor of just basically being upgrade sprues. Now, one of the predictions we made specifically was with Death Company. We basically talked about how Death Company, in all probability, is just going to become upgrade sprues going forwards for like Primaris kits. And this upgrade sprue, this box that they're going to do of upgrade bits for Dark Angels, is telling that story as far as I'm concerned. What I'm interpreting from what I'm seeing in front of me is, I think, it's highly probable that we are going to see a number of firstborn units be discontinued for Space Marines, specifically within like the Blood Angels and well, obviously the Dark Angels, and they're going to change dramatically because, now we have an upgrade sprue which essentially enables you to make Deathwing Terminators, and because of this, the changes to Deathwing Terminators are quite dramatic. Deathwing Terminators were unique because you could mix melee weapons, so Lightning Claws, Thunderhammer, Storm Shields, with Stormbolter, Power Fist, Stormbolter, Chain Fist, heavy weapons, etc. And you also had the unique option of having a plasma cannon within the Deathwing Terminator squads. Well, now what we're seeing with these new upgrade kits for the Deathwing Terminators is that it's highly probable that Deathwing Terminators are just now going to become like regular Terminators, i.e. Sergeant with a power sword and a Stormbolter, everyone else with Power Fist, Stormbolter, and one dude will have a heavy weapon, which could be a plasma cannon if they want it to be. So that's a huge change to Dark Angels and Deathwing specifically, if it happens. Obviously, there's a chance they may keep it the way it was, but based on what I'm seeing here, it seems probable that they are removing that flexibility.
Well, yeah, potentially. I mean, if the Assault Terminators come out and then Deathwing Knights get an option to mix and match some of those melee options and you just kind of kit bashing, then maybe not. But yeah, as you say, currently it looks like you're just getting a plasma cannon and a power sword for your Terminators, and that's it. Oh no, they've basically done, is it Sons of Morkai or Hounds of Morkai? Do you remember those?
The Hounds of Morkai. They've Hounds of Morkai us, yeah.
Basically, yeah, they're like, and admittedly, that was literally just a paint scheme, but it's like, it feels like that kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's
where it's most.
It's a simplified version, isn't it? Oh yeah, you get a back banner. I hope this is a holdover, but it probably isn't. But even then, you get, let's say you get 2 of those sprues per upgrade kit. That's not even enough to do a whole squad. You basically get to do the sergeant on your outriders with that, and that's it. And then all the other outriders are just generic.
Yeah, and obviously
it's a real shame
because we don't know what's going on yet with Ravenwing. There could yet be another announcement from Games Workshop for more Ravenwing releases, but there are 3, maybe 4 kits that are in turmoil. Black Knights and by extension Command Squad. Are they staying? Or is the Black Knights and Command Squad getting discontinued? I think Black Knights and Command Squad will remain because they are quite new kits, and also, they're sort of quintessentially Dark Angels. The only issue with them is that they're bikes on old, smaller bike bases, and in a world where like Outriders exist, will they want either to increase the base size on them, or will they continue to have them on the older base sizes? Wait and see. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Black Knights and Command Squads. And then obviously we've got the Landspeeder Vengeance and the Landspeeder Dark Shroud. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens to those. Are they going to keep those Landspeeders, or are they going to get rid of them? And then the last of that is the Talon Master, the Ravenwing Talon Master, which is based off of the old Landspeeder kit. Is that going? In all probability, it's going to go. So then what's taking its place? Are they going to just have Samael, or are they going to be like, just, for a Ravenwing, just take a chaplain on a bike, because it's the only model that we've gotten around to putting on a bike yet in an HQ section. So, yeah, I'm really intrigued by what they're doing with Ravenwing. I think that's the one that's really interesting, and that's most telling. I think what they do with Ravenwing is really going to paint the picture for what's happening with Blood Angels and what's coming down the pipeline for, like, say, Space Wolves as well. Because if it is that they don't really do Ravenwing that well, and they just kind of go, look, you had a good run, but we're getting rid of all this stuff. We're getting rid of everything that is Ravenwing, and now Ravenwing is just an Outrider upgrade sprue. Like, sorry.
That would be a bit of a shame, but also wouldn't surprise me too much.
Wouldn't surprise me either.
They might do because, with most army refreshes, they do phase 1, phase 2. You'll get half 1 year, another half the year after. So it might be, if you see this as a range refresh just for Dark Angels, half of the army's coming this year, half might come next year, potentially. But, with Black Templars, they did it all in one. Admittedly, Black Templars had a lot lower model count, so that's why they could do it for that, I think. It will be interesting to see what they do. If they try and redo a lot of these major chapters like Blood Angels and Space Wolves all in this edition, that'd be quite impressive. I suspect it will be a bit this year and a bit later on, or taking stuff away now and then redoing it at a later date. So they might go, hey, you've just got this basic Outrider and an upgrade sprue for now, and then down the line when they've got a bit more capacity, be like, here's some cool unique sculpts. But the fact that they're doing more upgrades, like upgrade style sprues, might just be the way forward. Like, keep more stuff as generic Space Marines, because that's easier rather than trying to sell unique faction specific sculpts. But who knows?
Yeah, it is interesting though, I think. And I think this is probably, I think what they do with the Ravenwing, what they do with this whole situation will be very telling for what the future plans are around other Marines. And I think that's the thing that's going to be super interesting. But look, at the end of the day, as someone who owns, say, Black Knights, and, it's quite an interesting situation, because, like, from a Dark Angels perspective, it's probable that I'm going to end up rebuying all of my Terminators, not all of them, but a considerable amount of them. And I've got a considerable amount of Ravenwing, and it's possible that a lot of that's going to get discontinued. And this is definitely one of those situations where, it's understandable that someone in my position would be quite vocally annoyed about that. But in a way, I kind of just accept it as a kind of inevitability of the evolving landscape of the game. It's like, at the end of the day, like, things have moved on. And if it is that Black Knights and command squads within the Ravenwing and the Talon Master, etc., are all, being sunsetted in favor of newer sculpts, it kind of feels like one of those things that kind of is what it is at this stage. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is obviously frustrating. I'd love it if, we were in a situation where those things were still supported and still wanted. And, obviously they'll probably put them in Legends and other things. But yeah, I think, if that's the way it's going to go, I suppose I'll just sort of accept it for what it is. But, again, I'm quite, enthusiastic about what I'm seeing. I think, my Dark Angel army has been with me for a long time. I definitely excited about the opportunity to refresh it. The Deathwing Assault box set that they are releasing looks really compelling, in my opinion. I think it looks really good. And it's highly probable, Phil, that I'm going to try and buy 2 of these boxes.
Oh, you madman. That is.
I think well, but that's then 30 Terminators, isn't it? I mean, I already own 10 of the new Terminator sculpts, so, get this on top, and then that's my army done.
Yeah, well, you save some room for some Assault Terminators, though.
Well, I got the sword, the Deathwing Knights, so it's all good.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
I
was going to say, keep hold of your old minis, your Talamasters and stuff like that. Keep hold of them for about 10 years, and then Forge World will come up with a Warhammer, the Black Crusade, which will be a 7th Ed nostalgia trip with all the old minis. Because that is, I keep saying it, there's 3 time periods in 40k. Horus Heresy, pre-Primaris, and Indomitus, which is post-Primaris. So yeah, the Black Crusade is the quintessential sort of middle years of 40k that will need to get addressed at some point and have its own game system.
It'll come back around. It
will do. And it'll be nostalgia with old minis. That'll be it.
But in all seriousness, I genuinely think I'll probably pick up a couple of these box sets, just because I just think this is great. I think it's exactly the army I want to have. I already own it. I mean, that's the joke of it, because I've already got like 30 Terminators, but they're not the new Terminators. So
that's true. Well, because didn't they sell a bunch of the old Terminators literally this time last year, or not even less than? And
not even that. Like 6 months ago.
Was that who was in that one? Was that Azrael? Oh, hello.
Say that again.
Who was in that box set? Which character was it?
I'm trying to remember, but yeah, it was. There was definitely a box set that really. Oh, there it is. It was Vashtor, Azrael, and a unit of Deathwing Terminators. Which again, I think we even said it at the time. Like I believe we called them on it.
Yes, no, we did. It's old minis that are going to be getting rid of. Here's the thing. I mean, this box set is really tempting. If I was a new Space Marine collector or I wanted to get into Dark Angels, I mean, just for Terminators alone, I think look great. Plus, even though I was a bit disparaging about the mini, I think it actually is cool. Low model count, really decent sculpts, love Terminators. Like, if I wanted a small force of anything, that would tick my box. I would happily have that box and build it. Not that I've got the time or capacity to do any of that, because I've got my own projects to work on. But if my plate was clear and I had a pick of 40k things, it would tempt me, is what I would say. So yeah, I think the box set's pretty cool.
It's a great army as well from it's low model count, like literally.
Very
thematic. Fair enough. I mean, you're still looking at a 2,000 point army of Terminators is still like 35, 40.
I would look at this as 1,000 points doubles list is how I would do it. Or,
you'd still need. Well, so in Terminators alone, you're talking probably 600 to 620 points worth of Terminators. Belial's probably going to come in at like 100 points. So 720 with him. And then you could layer in, say, another Space Marine captain. To be honest with you, I'd probably just take a couple Space Marine captains.
In Terminator, because there's 2 sculpts, isn't there? Once one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when they finally get around to releasing it, and then if you could get your hands on them, a couple of Terminator Ancients to sprinkle into the squads just to bulk them out.
Or the Terminator Chaplain.
Terminator Chaplain couldn't be added to the squad with a captain. You could only add the Ancient to the squad with the captains.
He can just go solo.
Yeah, he could just go solo, just hang out on his own.
Exactly, or join a different squad because you've got plenty.
I mean, that would be the way to go, though. I suppose you could get like the chaplain, get the librarian, and then literally just have like and then Bilal, who, if I'm honest with you, based on Bilal's current stats in the current rules for him, I would just take a normal Terminator captain over Bilal, but I'd just be like, that Bilal model is a Terminator captain because that's what he is. Because normal Terminator captains are better than Bilal currently, but assuming that they give him some good rules updates, hopefully that'll be cool. But yeah, you could get those. You could add 3 characters to it, and then you get in shooting distance of 1,000 points. You'd still have to add something to it. I mean, again, it depends how you manage your enhancements, I suppose. But even then, like, I mean, best case scenario, you're talking. Best case scenario for this box, plus 2 characters, you're talking 850 points. So you'd have to throw in another 150 points with something.
Assault Terminators.
Yeah, maybe. Well, again, I think Terminator squads at the minute are like 180-ish, 170-ish points, I want to say. I assume the sword, I keep calling it sword, brother. I assume the Dark Angel. Yeah, the Deathwing Knights. I assume the Deathwing Knights will be coming in at 210, 200 sort of level. So all things being equal, as I've said many times today, that's my catchphrase for this episode, all things being equal. Like I genuinely think that there's a good value in it, and I think it builds a good army. But basically you get 30 Terminators, big squads of 10. In fact, 40 Terminators in squads of 10. And then Lionel Johnson, and that's 2,000 points, basically.
Nice. That's a lot of models for Terminators.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, mate, having played this army a couple of times in its current form, because I've got this army in my current range.
Because wasn't it your top pick of like 8th edition as well was Terminator Spam?
Yeah, and I still love it to this day. The thing is with the Lionel Johnson Terminator army that I've got, it's complete YOLO. You don't care what your opponent's doing and what their plans are. You just put it in their face and go, "What you got? Can you kill Lionel Johnson right now?" The answer is probably no, because he's being protected by a load of Terminators. You just run them at them, and they just don't know what to do, because then once they get in there, they just start smashing everything up. And the weird thing is like, because Terminator's now a T5, because they've got 3 wounds, because they've got 4 up invuns, and because they've got 2 up armor saves, and because everything's cover, and because APs have kind of been reduced in some places, they are really tough to get rid of, especially when you've got them in big units. Like, they're just running around. And then Lionel Johnson is a monstrosity. So I basically, every time I've ran this army list, I've just basically gone with behind enemy lines, and then I try and work out some other fixed objective that I could get. But then literally I just run at people and then see what happens. It's literally
that sounds very much how you play your knight army as well.
Yes, yeah. It's sort of my archetype for this kind of thing. It's just basically I've got a massive hammer and I'm just going to swing it at you and see what you do in response.
You're an orc player at heart, clearly.
Well, I am an orc player as well, mate.
Are you?
In Age of Sigmar, yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, actually, yes, and a good point. I was thinking more 40k. I was like, it's one of the few armies I don't remember you ever having.
It's funny, though, isn't it, really? I think actually what's hilarious about my journey in 40k is the Dan of old was like a nuanced Eldari player that used all of these movement-heavy lists with all of this shenanigans.
I like how you say nuance and like, oh, it was all clever. I just took 12 flyers, Dan. That's not nuance.
Mate, no, you know for a fact that's not always been the kind of Eldari lists I've ran.
I'm teasing.
But it's true, but that took, mate, honestly, that was still like, that was a heck of a thing to get your head around. And like, this is the thing, right? Like, I think the problem, well, not the problem, but I think the reality is now is I am like the antithesis of what I used to be, because I just ain't got it in me anymore to be that clever. I'm just like, whatever. I'm just going with these easy lists where I could just hit you really hard and then just see what happens, you know?
Makes total sense.
That's become my strategy. I've just basically boiled everything down to, I'm going to hit you as hard as I possibly can. What can you do in response? like,
Yeah, in which case this box set is definitely for you.
oh, 100%, mate, 100%. The only issue is going to be getting hold of the thing, because
Oh
I dare say
yes,
it's going to
this
sell
will
out.
be this is definitely going to be one of his one and done boxes, so it will be fun for you to try and get hold of.
I am going to put in an order with Pete from Entoyment. That's how I'm going to do it.
Ooh. Do it the old school way, get someone to actually do it for you.
Well, Pete's like the owner of Entoyment, which is one of the. It's the store where 40K Brawl hosts their events and stuff. So I know Pete quite well, and obviously I support him by helping run events with him and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I can call in a favor from Pete. I don't do it often because I probably could have secured an old world box through Pete as well, but I was like, I'm happy to let that one go, really, even though it is a little hard because I wouldn't mind getting it, but I sort of had a moment of clarity on that one. But yeah, with this one, I probably will. Yeah. You know what it's going to be? I'm going to be walking into town on like Saturday and I'll see it in the Warhammer store in town on the shelf and I'll be like, why shouldn't I have it? Why shouldn't I keep it? Anyway. But I'm very excited for Dark Angels. It'll be fun to smash together some Space Marines and play some 40K with an army that I already own because I can technically field this army already, but it'll have nicer, newer models, Phil. So that's
what it's all about.
Exactly. Assuming I ever get around to painting them. This is intended to be my goal for RFW as well. At the moment,
that's not far away. That's April time.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind we don't know when this is coming out.
We've got to assume it's coming out
soon. So
like end of Jan, February time.
Yeah. So that only gives you a couple of months. Get that.
That'd be fun.
Get that airbrush going, and bone white.
Yep. That's it, mate. That's it. No, I think it'll be all right. Because again, it won't be because that's 1750 points, isn't it? RFW?
Yes. Yeah. I wish it was less, but
I wish it was less. So I wish you'd go for 1500. Just make life so much easier.
Achievable.
Yeah, but no, that's my vibe for RFW. Just a big load of Terminators with a line.
Nice. That sounds cool.
And again, I'm just going to throw it at people. Be prepared, other RFW competitors. Be prepared for Lionel Johnson and a bunch of Terminators running at you because that's what's happening.
Brilliant.
Assuming I can get them painted in time. And noting as well, Phil, just because I'm a stickler now for this generic grey colour scheme, I probably won't actually have the Deathwing Terminators as Deathwing Terminators, as in like the normal Terminators. I'm probably just going to have them as generic grey Terminators, and then I'll paint the Deathwing Knights as actual Deathwing because they're a specialist unit for that, and then I'll just represent because that's my goal at the moment. It's like basically if it's a chapter specific unit, it gets painted in the chapter color schemes. But if it's a generic Space Marine unit, it just gets painted grey.
Which is like your Unnumbered Sons color scheme.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess it gives you the flexibility to technically run your generic stuff as any chapter that you want, regardless of color scheme, even though you don't need to technically do that anymore. But I guess it makes a bit more sense lore-wise why a certain faction is hanging out with this generic Space Marine chapter, because that's literally what the Unnumbered Sons were all about.
Yeah, well, it's just, for me, it's more just like you establish, because that's the thing, like, that it's so frustrating, like, having to rebuy entire armies, even though that's what I'm doing. But it's so irritating, like, with Space Marines, where you're like, oh, I need the red ones, I need the blue ones, I need the yellow ones. It's like, for flipping heck. Just, like, establish a baseline, and then just, like,
But I guess you can just do that now anyway, right? You could just be I've got my Ultramarines and they're going to hang out with my Blood Angels, but I'm running them all under this, certain detachment.
That is also true. That's true. That is, correct entirely. But, Anyway, so that's the vibe. That's what we're going for. Excited for Dark Angels. Look forward to hopefully seeing some more stuff from them. Fingers crossed we get some extra support for the Raven Wing and we see Ezekiel. But Yeah, but overall, a nice Christmas surprise. I didn't rate these kits because normally I do. Bilal gets Bilal, you're an 8 out of 10. Bilal, a solid 8. The inner circle companions, 5, underwhelming, and the upgrade kit is, it's 6. It's all right. I mean, it's fine. Plasma cannon looks great, actually. 7
that's
for
true.
the plasma cannon. Plasma cannon takes it up a notch. But look, excited for Dark Angels. Even though they write terrible stories about the lion, even though the Risen is a silly idea, I'm too far gone, Phil. I can't not love them.
That's fair enough.
I just like in my little secret world having my own little stories for them that no one else agrees with. In my world,
that's exactly what headcanon's all about, and
exactly
doing the hobby your way.
Exactly. In my world, Lionel Johnson encountered Zabriel, on that forest moon of wherever it was, and Lion looked at him and went, "Oh, you're a traitor," and then killed him, and then and then came into contact with some other fallen, that would have otherwise been risen, and Lionel Johnson went, "Silly you," and killed them. And that's how it went.
Yeah. So for you, the companions are definitely not risen. They are thoroughbred Dark Angels.
Absolutely. They're the most zealots of zealots. They have persecuted and murdered many in the pursuit of fallen. And rightly so, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Let it burn, is what I say. You get that vengeance. Anyway, God bless them. Right, that'll do, I reckon. We're going to move on to whatever it is we decide to do next, which is probably the outro, which is where we'll talk about all the general things that have been going on. And yeah, that's it. Any thoughts and feels, Phil? All good?
I'm all ready to go to the outro.
All right, let it begin. Transitional noise. All right, all but specifically Andy. This is the bit where we are going to review or critique or just generally plug our 5-star review, Buddy and Pal, Ode Covert Painting, as they are called on the Instagram. Covert_painting. You'll find their Instagram handle in our description. And what we're looking at here is quite an eclectic mix, it's fair to say, isn't it, Phil?
Yep, yeah, a good healthy dose of 40k and Age of Sigma. I don't think there's
and mountain biking, strangely.
There's a couple of those that have snuck in.
I'm not sure I agree with these Warhammer fans incorporating extreme sports into their daily routine, as it were. It feels a little bit overly active for me.
Well, that's true. It also looks like there's either skiing or snowboarding happening in one picture as well.
Oh, it's just wild. I mean, who are these people in their active lives? And what are they doing in this hobby?
Getting outside, getting exercise. It's not allowed.
No, this will never do. Although now I am very much of that vintage where I probably really do need to start considering something, because I'm probably going to start collapsing in on myself before too long. Anyway, yeah, so we've got a whole mixture of stuff. Loads of Ultramarines. Kicks off with a really cool picture of his, Ultramarine armies that he's been putting together. Looks majoritively, although I could be wrong, but it looks pretty majoritively Firstborn. Firstborn. Primaris.
With the exception of some Terminators.
Which may be the new Terminators, though. This might not be like, the old school little ones, but regardless.
No, they are, because they're from March last year.
Ah, well, then in which case, there you go. But the point is that, there's a really nice collection of Ultramarine bits here. What I quite like is he has posted one of his early fantasy minis from 1995. Did you spot that one?
Oh, I did.
Empire Halberdier?
Yes, I've got a couple of those, in fact, myself. I never got around to painting mine, but I like it's almost Beano-esque black dot eyes. It looks very literally comical in the kind of cartoon sense.
That is very true. It's very true. It's kind of got like a pie face type quality to it. In that sense, he would have been one of the. Was it the Bash Street kids?
Yeah, Bash Street kids, or was it Bash Street Boys?
Bash Street Boys, Bash Street Kids. Well, was it? Well, maybe kid. Who knows?
I think it was kids.
What I quite enjoy as well is he's clearly playing games in his kitchen, but his kitchen table's got like these cheaters all over it, which obviously spells certain doom for any miniatures that find themselves off the table. Obviously, they're just going to get mauled by these these dangerous wild cats, as it were. But no, look, overall, I think again, it's obviously there's someone obviously who is painting to a very high tabletop standard. I think it's really, really, really good army painting that I'm seeing here. Lots of really cool variety, nice, kind of lighting effects and really good, kind of spotlighting in terms of some of the characters. His most recent paint job, or at least as it appears to be, is the lieutenant with combi weapon, or Reaver Lieutenant, as he might have been called when put out in the Leviathan box. But yeah, there's some really nice kind of lighting effects there with the way that the sort of light direction's gone, and obviously trying to add some interesting kind of like scuffs and marks to the leather, which is really cool. Really actually like the way that they've painted the blades. Kind of gives me like and this is not intended as an insult at all. I actually think it's a really cool kind of style. It sort of reminds me of a kind of PlayStation 1 style paint job where like you get like really one of those like high fidelity PS1 models. Like I'm thinking of like games like, did you ever play Vagrant Story back in the day, Phil, on the PlayStation 1?
I did not. No.
Okay, well, it kind of gives it sort of a vibe of that kind of look where there's a certain kind of like, yeah, it's just a really kind of cool but chunky sort of style of rendering the imagery, as it were. I just think, there's a lot of stuff I really like about this. And again, there's a coherent army, looks really great. Plus, he's playing Iron Jaws in Age of Sigmar, so I can't not love that. I mean, a fellow Iron Jaws.
Well, exactly. One of his first photos was of, in his own words, the Christmas cabbage, which looks very cabbage. Good. Which is, what's his actual name? Because I can never remember.
Gobsprak. Not Gobsprak, sorry. No, this is, oh God, why have I now forgotten his name? Gobsprak is I've been so used to saying Gobsprak lately. I've completely forgotten. I think it's Godrek. No, Godrek's the flipping dwarf. Oh, it's God something. Hang on. I'm going to lose my brain here.
Gordrak.
Gordrak, that's
yes.
it.
But it's the Maw Crusher is the cabbage, name that I was actually trying to think of.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, the Maw Crusher is the cabbage. Yes, and the man on top. Yeah. I apologise. Because I could remember the name Maw Crusher. I just couldn't remember that specific thing. But mate, no, it looks like a really good collection of stuff. And again, full disclosure, we actually ran into Andy at Warhammer Fest last year, which was really cool. There's actually a picture of one of his kids here, Phil, wearing a Lookout Sir badge, no less.
I didn't see that picture.
Did you not spot that? It's they're sporting the merchandise, mate, which is great.
Oh, I see it now. Yes, brilliant. That was I think I handed them to them, so that's good that they got well used.
Well, if they're listening now, apologies that your dad subjugates you to this podcast, but obviously we appreciate the listening, and hopefully if there's a Warhammer Fest again this year or some such similar event, we'll have the pleasure of running into Andy again and catching up on things which were. But Phil's now following him on Instagram, right? You've done the decent thing. I was already following him before.
Well, I think he's an Iron Jaw player, so you were undoubtedly going to bump into him online at some points. Exactly.
In the places us Iron Jaws players hang out, getting the names wrong of our significant characters. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool. No, fantastic. Appreciate it. I think obviously, me and Phil are following him. You should do so too. Links in the description. Check it out. Share the love. We're going to transition now into the outro. cheers very much, Andy, for the 5-star review. And hope you have a great 2024. And see you around. Now it is time for what has become to many the favourite bit of the podcast, that being, Phil, the outro. This is the bit where me and Phil basically take it upon ourselves to have a general chat about things going on with ourselves and the hobby in the general sense. No real kind of theme, although in this instance there are some things that we hadn't talked about as segments, which we would like to address. So it won't have escaped anyone's attention that Games Workshop has shown off their 2024 lineup through silhouettes, and lots of people over the internet were obviously talking about these silhouettes, and we will be no different. Although, I suppose, do we want to include the Age of Sigmar silhouettes in that as well, Phil?
Yeah, go on. Let's do it. Why not do the Horus Heresy ones as well? While we're at it, do them all. We're 2024.
Did they do Horus Heresy ones?
I'm pretty sure they did. They became a well-rounded podcast.
Yeah, they did. I've got them here.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. This is where we cover all the topics, even though the majority of our listeners just want to hear about 40k.
Let's force it upon them until they like it.
Well, exactly. That's the only way that, I know how to do things. So Silhouette Rise. I'm just watching the video now as a reminder. There's the dude that's quite obviously a custody, right? Like, that's the opening shot, the custodian's geezer.
Yeah.
So that's quite probably a custodian's. Although what's interesting...
It was funny, I saw lots of people claim it was a Votan mini because of the crest on the back, but it is clearly a custodian's mini.
Well, it's weird, though, as well, because I do understand why they would consider that as a possibility. I was looking through a bunch of old... why do I always forget his name? The really famous artist that does concept art for
John Blanche.
John Blanche. I was looking through a bunch of the John Blanche pieces, trying to see if there was any kind of old references to like custodians with this kind of plumage. And there's an image of the Sentinels of Terror, like standing at the gates of Terror, and there's two custodians there. And they do obviously have plumage, but nothing near or nothing quite as central as this. So, they've kind of come out of left field, so to speak. But it does look like the individual is wielding a pretty sizable shield potentially as well, which is another interesting element, I suppose.
And I think people have worked out it's potentially I can't remember the actual name, but it's like a melter pike.
Oh, that would be interesting that they'd actually added those into the plastics. That would be really cool.
Yes, although I guess the assumption is this is just a character rather than an actual unit. But,
gotcha.
You never know. You never know what they do.
Could it be Valdor, Phil? Will it be Valdor?
I thought so, but,
No, it's probably not going to be Valdor. It'd be cool if it was Valdor. But I doubt it'll be Valdor. Though they're writing Valdor back into the story, aren't they? He's... I've
heard rumours, yes. So that would be interesting.
There's part of me, like, with certain elements of like the helmet and stuff, where I first thought it might have been an Alpha Legion.
Oh, interesting.
Because like Alpha Legion have those very similar kind of crested helmets with like, but they normally have like the serpent head at the front instead of the eagle. And then it's got very similar, almost like, it's sort of more of a kind of triangular type of like jawline to the like helm, which kind of chimes more with the Alpha Legion. But again,
the real giveaway, if I recall correctly, is the bottom of the spear has the sort of double-headed eagle, which all the custodians have, if I recall. So that without a doubt, is a custodies. It'd be cool. Hopefully, because obviously they pretty much said every faction's getting a miniature of some kind.
Yeah.
A lot of them are just going to be one model characters, which probably custodians will be, but I'd love it if they got a bit more of a range of minis, or they just sort of ported over some of the Forge World stuff into plastic. That'd be quite interesting as well, I think.
Yeah, No, I do agree with you, mate. I think that would definitely be a win. The other geezer, the quite obviously orc, or not orc, as it was.
Yeah.
I really have been playing too much Age of Sigmar.
Mech Boy? Is that the word?
Mech Boy, or could it be Captain Badrock?
I mean, that would be awesome. He does, but Captain Badrock has a big hat.
Yeah, but he doesn't mean that he has to keep his big head.
Oh, he's got to have it on his head, surely.
Well, he's got to have his big Napoleon hat, otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, he's just a regular orc. Yeah.
Fair. In all probability, it's just going to be your run-of-the-mill big mech, isn't it?
Quite. Yeah, I'd assume so.
Which is weird, though, because, like, big mechs, well, they're not super well catered for, but they got, like, a few miniatures for big mechs, so I don't know. It's sort of weird because this one's obviously got, like, the multiple gun arms and stuff, but again, it's relatively evident that it's going to be an orc of some description. I mean, maybe could it be an orc in a kind of like new mech suit type deal where it's not like a big mech, but it's actually representative of a new unit type where orcs are using like exoskeletons or something really mad?
Maybe. It doesn't look that, I mean, it's hard to tell, but it doesn't look too bulky. So I assume it might be like a rig for the weapons rather than like a full-on enclosed, little big mech style.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there is an outside case that it could be Dark Mechanicus.
No. I mean, it just looks too orky for me. I mean, I'd love Dark Mechanicus to feature this year, and I'm hoping that, because obviously we've had Vastor, that we'll start seeing some more Dark Mechanicus stuff outside of, the little bits that we've had from, Blackstone Fortress and things like that. So it'd be cool for that to be a whole range.
It would be really cool. It's just as I sort of watch it rotate, I mean, it definitely contains multiple elements that would definitely indicate
feel orky.
Yeah, because it's got like the sort of the orb pieces on the sort of like the Tesla orb things. And
yeah.
But I'm not sure about the totem. I mean, maybe someone's unpacked this more than. But there's like the pole that it's the banner. I mean, again, the angles are so few here, but like I don't know. I mean, like I suppose it's in all probability it's an orc, but you never know. It could be some kind of like ridiculous like thing where the Dark Mechanicus are building their own kind of like Scutari type troops, but they're not particularly graceful about it because they're just like, you there, boy, let's cover you in everything and just send you off. So they're like more like the. Do you remember that gang in the really questionable Stallone Judge Dredd movie where they were in the desert, and it was like all those cannibals in the desert with Stallone?
No, I don't remember that bit.
Oh, well, fine. Well, anyway, sort of reminiscent of that, where they're like, just all like smushed together with robot bits, and it's all very unsophisticated, but it is still very technology, which would be reminiscent of what the Dark Mechanicus might do.
That's true. That is true.
But in all probability, it's an orc. And then the third of the miniatures that they basically revealed, because I mean, at this point, they're not even trying, right? Like, I mean, this silhouette is just a crew. It's just a crew
on something, which is awesome.
Like crew talks.
I've said crew are awesome. They sort of deserve their own supplement, or sort of to be their own sub-faction outside of Tau, so you can play them independently. That would be great. Hopefully it's not just a character and it's like a unit, or this is like a unit leader or a character alongside a unit that will also come out. So hopefully we'll see more crew coming along with this one.
I would love that the secret codex for this year was Kroot. I think that'd be amazing. I'd also love it to be Dark Mechanicus. I'd love it to be something else entirely different. But I think in all probability, this isn't the edition where we see the Kroot codex. I think Kroot have been around for such a long time, and they've sort of taken such a back seat to the Tau in terms of their popularity. Most people running Tau will only add Kroot to their armies when there is a weird time in the competitive meta where the Kroots really shine. And I acknowledge that obviously there's lots of people out there who probably absolutely love the Kroot, but majoritively, I would say those individuals are fewer than are loving the Tau. But I do think, given the age of the range, it's only reasonable that they start to update the Kroot elements of it. My problem is, and although I know Games Workshop doesn't really usually care too much about this, but I don't really know what archetype Kroot fulfill. Like, if you did a Kroot codex, like what are they there to be? Like, I feel like Kroot are basically like a kind of jungle fighter or kind of combat-y, more sort of feral armies. So it's sort of like they're competing with things like Catachan or Orcs or I don't really...
they're basically, let's say, a primitive version of Orcs, because Orcs are quite technological. In fact, all the armies, bar Tyranids, right, have a lot of technology around them. And Tyranids are just, let's say, insects, for want of a better word. Like pure xenomorph style, just pure bodies. There's no extra accoutrements to them. Whereas Kroot are very, like, back to basics. I think the tropes are probably like almost like Native American Indians, if we're gonna pluck something out of a like sort of time period, because they've just got like rifles and they're just riding on animals. It's very low tech. Very cool though, I think, is an aesthetic. So that I think on their own they are different enough from other factions to have a place. Whether they'd be wildly popular as a sort of standalone faction, maybe not. But yeah, I'd love to see them get a bit of love and sort of be fleshed out, even if it's just an option within the Tau Codex to just only take Kroot, and that is a sort of viable thing. I'm just trying to think if it's comparable to anything else in any of the others, but not really. Guard have always had some elements of like the Ministorum in them previously, and it's almost like just taking those elements and running it as an army. So yeah, it'd be cool if they did get fleshed out, I think.
Yeah, it would be cool, but I think it's highly improbable you could enter into a situation where Kroot could become its own army in the construct of the Tau Codex. Like, you'd have to give them a lot more units. Like 40k now in particular is played with so many miniatures. There's just no way that Kroot, within the way that 40k is pointed currently, could ever get to a place, unless of course you for some reason did a storyline where all of a sudden the Kroot became the Incredible Hulk and they basically became like super duper duper amazing. Like, but at the moment they're like, the stat line that's sort of been established for them over the years and the place they've kind of occupied is these are the T3 no armor save screen unit for Tau, right? Like, I can't imagine that all of a sudden becoming toughness 6 with a 2-up armor save.
No, I don't think you'd want it to be almost like. I think that their place is sort of like very much like it would have to be like as a horde army in a way that Orcs were, but sometimes aren't now because there are so many like elite options. And you can have obviously the big riders, and so you've got sort of like the animal herds sort of style that you could lean into if you want to have some sort of bigger units rather than just like lots of infantry. I mean, imagine if in the lore they actually separated them out and they go recruit rebels against Tau, which kind of goes against the whole philosophy of what Tau's about. But as we all know, Tau are complete oppressors, and it's like you don't really get a choice to join the Tau. And we don't know, I mean, I don't know because I don't know Tau lore all that well, but did the Kroot really go willingly, or were they forced? Are they like indentured into servitude to the greater good?
I mean, again, they've evolved the lore. I was much more familiar with what the relationship was between the Kroot and the Tau in the kind of first versions of the story. As it went on, they really didn't like early doors. They kind of explained it because, you know, in third edition when they introduced Tau, they were like, "Look, Tau," and we're like, "Oh, cool!" And then and look, they've got Kroot, and you're like, "But what a Kroot!" And they're like, "Yeah, they're friends with the Tau." And like, okay, sure, why not? And why are they friends with the Tau? Well, because the Tau found them and convinced them that they should join forces and do it for the greater good. And it was all like, oh, okay.
But we're not going to give you any of our technology.
But they did originally. Kroot Shapers used to carry pulse rifles and wear Tau armor plating.
Ah, I don't remember those at all.
Yeah, the original Shaper had. I feel like, well, he definitely was carrying a pulse rifle in the air, and I think he had a gauntlet from the Tau. I think the lore reason for that was he needed it to actually use the weapon or whatever. But yeah, that was like weird because back then the Shaper had 2 weapon options and blisters were really weird. So you would either get a Kroot rifle or you'd get the pulse rifle, and like it was just potluck on which one happened to be in stock, basically. But that did definitely happen. So yeah, there was a time where they were a lot more kind of chummy, but like nowadays. I mean, you can maybe still buy that Shaper Mini, but like anyway, but I think it only comes with the Kroot rifle now. I think the days of them sprinkling in pulse rifles are long gone. But yeah, like I'd love to see a Kroot Codex. Of course, I would. I'd love to see a Forces of Xenos randomness Codex. You know, like I'd love literally the opportunity where it's like you could like just to have like one of those like compendiums you get in like D&D where it's like a monster book where it's just like here's a load of random stuff.
Well,
sprinkle it in.
I've always liked the idea because I think you get it in like more time in other games. You get like these random monster encounters that are there just to be in the mix of your game and mess up both players' plans. I would love it if there's like a table in a book that you can roll on and it's like, cool, in this mission you've got a random giant spider, and it obviously has its own like very simple AI mechanics to dictate what it's doing or what it's moving towards or attacking, but it's like you both need to deal with that while at the same time dealing with each other. Stuff like that would be great, and an awesome way of adding more Xenos races to the universe. And that's one of the great things about the Horus Heresy books is they kind of flesh those elements out. But you don't need to do it in a way where you've got to create a whole new faction, like full of miniatures to do that. And some of the artwork in, I think, was it 8th and 9th? There was like a mushroom with guns that appeared in the core rule book, like awesome artwork. I'd love to see really random stuff like that appear in the game in miniature form, even if it's only like the odd random thing. And maybe that's where Black Zone Fortress could thrive with adding in those elements, because we did get a few random things in there, like the amber, for example.
It would be so cool if they started adding in those kind of like asymmetric gameplay mechanics as well as other kind of like scenarios where you have like game systems built around like overcoming challenges. So, you know, one player plays as a creature or a planet repelling like Space Marines or whatever. Like the idea, like, you know, it's just like some random thing and it's like, oh, it's a covert ops simulation. You ever heard of Bolt Action's 0200 hours system?
No, I don't think I have actually.
It's phenomenal. So 0200 hours is like a game system where it's about night raids. So like it's obviously Bolt Action, so it's World War II, and it's where you essentially are trying to engage the enemy in the dead of night. So it has like a patrol system built in and all this other stuff. So it's like your characters, your if you're like playing the defending army that the attacking army is kind of coming after in their compound, you know, your characters essentially have to kind of, your patrol has to just follow a fixed route, and there's some like AI elements to it. But basically, as the attacking player does actions, they amass points towards like alertness, and basically once they hit a certain threshold, the enemy is aware of them and can start attacking them. But then they still have to observe like line of sight and awareness and other things. So unless you've seen something, you can't just shoot out at it without knowing it's there and all that kind of stuff. So it's very but that kind of gameplay is like, it doesn't need to be that specifically, but I'd love to see something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there used to be that, like, I think even in the 8th edition, in the narrative section, there was rules for like sentry guards, and there were in obviously previous editions as well. Obviously, as part of a wider battle, and yeah, obviously, Rogue Trader really leaned into that. Like, you had a bestiary full of loads of different aliens that you could sort of model and represent. And yeah, have like a team of people go up against a more like a small mini army, because Rogue Trader was never really full scale armies or anything like that. So it'd be great sort of narratively if we saw some more stuff like that basically in 40k.
Yeah, it's just it's one of those things that is sort of a shame.
Or even Kill Team. Kill Team would be a perfect sort of setting to do that kind of thing as well.
Kill Team would be, yeah. I think that's the thing. Like, it's all too often now that we just accept that two perfectly balanced armies are approaching each other in optimal fighting conditions in a symmetrical set of ruins, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And again, I understand why that makes sense in that context. And as I've said throughout this podcast, I really enjoy the competitive 40k side of things as an exercise. But like, I would love to see GW giving more like interesting ways to play, like they did with boarding actions. That was interesting, but I mean more like what we've just sort of talked about here, with the idea of like, I don't know, just give us tools to make things more interesting. But I guess the thing is for GW is that they probably look at it and go, yeah, you say that, but like no one ever really buys that stuff, or no one's really interested in other ways to play. You all just want to play the same game over and over again. So, nice thought, but probably not.
Not likely. No.
Yeah. But anyway, there you go. Moving on, let's keep it within the stratosphere of Warhammer 40,000 and look at the Heresy miniatures, because let's be honest, like, I imagine the least amount of people are interested in the AOS stuff, so we'll do it at the end of this segment. And Heresy's all Space Marines, right? So everyone's got to love that, surely.
Oh yeah, but it's actually all. Is it all Solar Auxilia?
No, well, the opener is, we'd call him an ancient, but obviously in Horus Heresy, they'd be a standard bearer. So it kicks off with a standard, which is cool. But yeah, basically everything from there on in is the Solar Auxilia. So we see the new plastic scope for the Solar Auxiliary Walker. What are those things called again? They're the Scout Sentinels, aren't they?
I assume it's a form of Sentinel, but they sort of look different from even the Legions Imperialis version, because the Legions Imperialis, like kind of scout walkers or sentinels, are like fully enclosed. These are almost like a halfway house between them and is it the June Striders for Adeptus Mechanicus?
The Iron Striders is what you're thinking
Iron
of.
Striders, yeah, that's it. So it's sort of a bit of a similar vibe to those. And obviously I think they teased a while back that there'd be a new plastic army for Horus Heresy. Solar Auxilia seemed, I don't want to say the obvious choice, because I actually think in a way Custodes would have been a more obvious choice from sort of low model count and popularity point of view. But maybe they deliberately didn't want to do that because they didn't want any kind of cross-pollination with 40k now, because they seem to be making a bit more of a distinction between those two. But with getting Solar Auxilia in Legions Imperialis, it felt more obvious that they would then just do full-scale plastic Solar Auxilia. So that's kind of cool to see. It means we'll be getting lots of the old resin tanks, I assume, like the Malcadors coming out in plastic at some point down the line. Basically means a big range refresh for many tanks that you can, I want to say, still take for guard in 40k.
Yeah, I mean, it's highly probable that these guys are going to make great, miniatures for 40k as much as in Horus Heresy. But incredible! I genuinely didn't believe that we'd see them do anything other than Space Marines. I just couldn't fathom that they would do an actual range of miniatures that wasn't Space Marines and plastic for this game system.
Yeah, it felt like they're doing just the popular stuff in plastic. So they're not doing everything in plastic. A lot of the upgrade stuff, a lot of the characters are still in resin. But I mean, this is great news that they are doing it in plastic, and they have the faith that that they know the game system's popular enough, not just within the Space Marines, that hopefully Adeptus Mechanicum, I should say. Custodes and Solar Auxilia are all going to get some plastic support down the line, which is awesome.
Oh, man, I mean, it's so exciting, man. Like, I think Horus Heresy is just in a great place at the moment. I think the system is super fun. I think the armies and the lore and the world around it is just incredible. And I just think, I think Heresy is just really amazing. And it's so cool to think that we're now going to move into a situation where, we're going to have these kind of new plastic Solar Auxilia to add to the whole kind of mix. I think I genuinely am really, really excited for Horus Heresy in the year 2024. I think, it's just a great game. And
I think it'll work great for 40k. I can see a lot of people just probably running these as guard or doing some really amazing kit bashes between guard bits and Solar Auxilia bits to kind of create like a new unique style regiment. I think that would be really interesting to see. I sort of love the heavy plate vibes that they have. So yeah, I think they'd make a great guard army.
And, just to say it for the sake of saying it, I've already seen examples in my own stratosphere of people who are interested in doing jump pack armies for 40k Space Marines who are prioritizing buying the Mark V Legion Assault Squad over the new Primaris. So it's really interesting, actually, because obviously, like, basically, up until the Assault Intercessors with jump packs existed, everyone was taking Primaris Marines and slapping jump packs on them. And now they do exist. People are going, I'll buy the Legion ones. They're way cooler.
Yes, I think because the scale is now much more similar. Like, yes, the armor marks are different, but even if you were to do a bit of a mix and match and go, well, I'll just swap the backpacks over because I think these backpacks look really cool on the Mark IV guys. So potentially that's what I would do if I had a choice.
Yeah, I tell you what though, man, it's just they are, and also as well, it's a price thing, right? Like, I think like the Assault Squad, that you get 10 men for 42 quid or whatever it is, whereas for the Primaris Assault Intercessor with jump pack, you get 5 of them for like 35 quid. So it's like, okay, I'll pay like the 7 quid more and I'll get a squad of 10.
Oh, they come in 10s? Because I know a lot of the inventory... Oh, no, it's just for standard... the Mark IIIs are in squads of 20, that's it.
So the Mark IIIs, Mark IVs, and Mark Vs are all in 20s. But
for the basic infantry, yeah.
Yeah, but these ones are in 10s.
Okay, that's quite good.
But no, I'm loving Horus Heresy. I think you should too. So yeah, and Phil, you're obviously embracing it, sort of maybe kind of with your Thunder Warriors. So
tangentially, yeah, and obviously Legions Imperialis, sort of heresy.
Yep.
So,
very much heresy.
Exactly, just in a different scale.
Yeah. And then the last of the silhouette round is the Age of Sigmar. So first amongst them is something elfy this way comes. I assume it's a daughter of Cain in some description, but I've no idea. What do you reckon that's going to be, Phil?
Ooh, possibly. It could be that kind of crescent moon is very vibes of the Lumineth Realm Lords. So it could be
true.
Lumineth. It's definitely elfy of some description. You're right. It could be Daughters of Cain. I didn't think about that. I mean, yeah, it doesn't seem watery enough to be Eiseneth. Yeah, I would personally hedge my bets with Lumineth.
Yeah, I mean, Lumineth. Well, not. Oh, sorry, Idenef or Illumineth.
Lumineth, Realm Lords.
Oh, you go for the Realm Lords.
Yeah, I think that crescent shape on the weapon. I don't know, because then it looks a bit chainy, which would be a bit more. Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But yeah, the crescent shape is very much used as sort of, I don't want to say trope. It's a shape that's used a lot in Realm Lords on like their hats and stuff like that. So I think it might be for them.
Could be a new elf faction they make. Could be a whole new army of elves.
Oh, we got enough of them. We don't need more.
Come on, we need more elves in our lives. It could be, reminiscent of some of the things that we saw early doors in like Silver Tower. There was that geezer that was kind of like a witch. Not really seeing.
Is that like
guy.
the sort of smoke elf? I thought that was just
no. That was the Mist Weaver. I think she was called. Again, we haven't really seen that paid off yet aggressively. So there's probably various other subcultures of elves that could be explored. So potentially that's a potential option, isn't it?
True.
But
there's clearly a guy shooting some pistols, so I assume that's Cities of Sigmar.
I don't know if that is Cities of Sigmar, I kind of feel like that's a Stormcast.
Yeah, good point. It could be.
I think that's got it's a weird one because it's the obvious thing is to assume that it would be Cities, and obviously I would imagine that Cities are looking at a Wave 2 release, but then there's lots of chunkiness to the armor. There's obviously the sword kind of hilted.
Oh yeah, when you look at the thumbnail of the video, I would say that's Stormcast. Is it? I think based on the hats, the silhouette of he's got a little helmet with a thing on top.
Yeah.
That's Cities of Sigmar.
Now, here's the thing.
He's got some very curvaceous calves, and as I've pointed out many times, they don't like to do curves on Cities of Sigmar models. So that would be my only argument against it. But it looks a bit too fancy for Stormcast, and all Stormcast have like a little skirt as well, which this one doesn't seem to have.
No, fair. Do you think it's an Underworlds gang?
Yeah, probably. I mean,
having in all probability, that's
there's potentially another. I don't know. Is there going to be another wave of Cities of Sigmar? Like they feel like they're pretty complete now. So yeah, an
there's still they could expand into the non-human.
Yes, but the human element seems pretty fleshed out. I mean, maybe that
it's very good.
Some more, but this feels like a character that isn't going to be in a unit. So. Yeah, it could be an Underworld's warband.
Yeah, no, I'd go along with that for sure. I'll tell you what, when you see the other imagery of the elf character, they've got a headdress that kind of is like a bird's face, which suggests to me it might not be an elf at all. It might actually be a disciple of Tzeentch.
Oh, like a chaos.
Because those axes are actually quite reminiscent of the disciples of Tzeentch. So it might be like a female disciple of Tzeentch unit.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Definitely got Warcry warband vibes. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, because it's running.
It would be really interesting. It would be really interesting as well, though, potentially, if they started introducing the idea of some elf units within Chaos Warbands as well. Like the idea that, this is a unit or just a character that is an elf, but it is but just happens to be aligned with disciples as he.
Well, I always thought it odd that Daughters of Cain weren't in the chaos bucket of super factions, right? And that they're in forces of order, whereas historically Dark Elves in Warhammer were always in the evil camp. So yeah, it would be cool to see, let's say, Chaos Elves, because for some reason Daughters of Cain aren't, for whatever reason. But they should be. Totally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they probably should be. Well, again, I say that. I don't really know the Daughter of Cain lore well enough to quantify where they should reside from a kind of ideology perspective, but they definitely seem dodgy.
But if they're seen as, at the end of the day, they might be out for themselves, but they're ultimately good at heart and will preferably align with the forces of order than against chaos gods, understandable. In which case, that does leave you room with proper, like, chaos elves that have fallen to chaos or that do worship Slanesh, for example, or something. And that would be cool either as a faction or as a warband, or even, as you say, a couple of units within a wider chaos group. And, potentially that they could do a sort of reverse 4 Cities of Sigma and have, because they've sort of separated out cities via all the races, because obviously that's, a lot of them were just ported over from fantasy. It'd be great to see more like mixed race units, teaming up together, or at least taking the dwarves and the dark elves, because I don't think and there's high elves in there as well, and then just updating them so they're wearing like the same armor or very similar looking to the Cities of Sigma human forces. Although I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of just drop them or drop a lot of them, and you have a unit or two representing those factions within Cities of Sigma range.
Yeah, I do think they need to expand in outside of the kind of human range for Cities of Sigma. But I think, like you say, again, who knows how they're going to approach that going forwards and how they're going to sort of synergize it. But I hope that they do more releases for it. I keep being tempted by Cities of Sigma, but at the moment, I've got my kind of project list for this year, and there's no room for Cities of Sigma in it. Between my Horus Heresy Dark Angels, my 40k Dark Angels, my Old Worlds Tomb Kings, and my AOS Auric War Clans, and a big part of this year for me is probably going to be 4th edition AOS as well. So really excited about that.
And Legions Imperialis.
And obviously I've got an obligation to do Legions Imperialis as well, so I would like to try and focus on that also. But yeah, as I say, my desk is full, Phil, at the moment, unfortunately.
That sounds more full than one could possibly have. So, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Back to the other miniatures that are being revealed. There's definitely a Nighthaunt mini in there. I'm assuming.
I was going to ask, is the lantern the Nighthaunts, or is that something else entirely?
From that image, I can't tell. I don't think it is. There's
a closing shot of a lantern, and the individual carrying the lantern has like what looks like reminiscent of a death mask on them, which is very similar to the Nighthaunt on a Thrones kind of like mask, but then.
The lantern's being carried by someone with feet. So, unless there's 2 shots of 2 lanterns.
Oh, there is. Oh, which one's where's the other shot of the lantern then? I might have missed it.
48 seconds in. It's a guy.
Oh, yes, there it is. Yeah. Oh, God, no, that's. Yeah, no, there be no lantern there. All right, fine. That's a guy with feet for sure.
Yes. No, in the Christmas rumor engine, there was definitely what looked like Nighthaunt with lots of like potions and sort of smoke and spirits coming from them, which I assume is also a Nighthaunt character of some kind. This looks like the Khan Wraith re-sculpted, which is a touch annoying because I only just painted up one of the old ones, and actually I converted him up to make his face and hands look more like the current ones, but that's fine. I'm happy with the one I've got. It'd be interesting to see what this one looks like, but I assume it's the Khan Wraith. because that's one of the old fantasy minis that will maybe one day be destined to head towards the old world once more.
Maybe. I mean, again, Night Haunts at the moment. I mean, obviously, we don't know what they're going to be giving them in 4th edition AOS or how the game of 4th edition AOS will function. But yeah, hopefully you're due some love. I feel like one of the main fixes for Night Haunts is just a handful of range 2 melee weapons would be fantastic.
All damage to weapons. I think just got a lot of weak hitters, and personally, I'd love a big monster to get monstrous rampage in that army. So bring back the old Forge World mini that was for them at one point, although sort of retroactively added to their army because it was an old fancy model. That would be great.
Yeah, you just need a really big ghost.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a ghost giant or giant.
You want
ghost.
the Mega Boo from Super Mario World.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
The only problem is if obviously you're looking at him, he won't do anything because he's covering his eyes up.
Oh, that's fair enough. Yeah. He's got to sneak in from behind.
It has to. Yeah, that's the way it goes. But it's cool to see. I mean, it's what all the Age of Sigmar players are calling out for. Give me another hero on foot. That's what I need.
Yes.
Come on, GW. Reward my new army book with a hero on foot, won't you?
Well, the last reveal is a model not on foot. It's clearly a cavalry unit, and I can't quite tell if it's Stormcast or if it's Illuminath Realm Lord's sort of weird animal.
I feel like this is Slaves to Darkness, isn't it?
Oh, might be.
But then maybe not. I mean, obviously, the animal itself looks quite chaosy with his tusks and all of his jagged angles. And the dude on top
fair
of
enough,
it
then.
Also is looking quite spiky. Now, again, there are many human factions within the Age of Sigmar, within the realms that the mortal realms that might on the surface have chaos-like qualities, but be themselves affiliated with the forces of order, for example. I don't feel like that's what this is, but then I don't really understand why we'd be getting yet another cavalry unit for the slaves. The Slaves to Darkness is like it's got so much cavalry already. Like, I don't really understand why you would go, what the Slaves to Darkness need is a unit of cultist cavalry. It's like, but again, maybe the idea there is that you've got a unit of cavalry that keep pace with the warriors, and ultimately it means you're able to build more of an archetype, so you can go for a whole cavalry army, maybe.
It's definitely it's definitely human, I would say. It's got a top knot, which makes me feel like it's a female chaos warrior. The trick could be that it's actually a Warcry warband. Like it's
There's always a chance
unit within that, so it's not a brand new unit, but it does have. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like it would be, because it could fit in with Cities of Sigmar as kind of some like scout unit where it's more like kind of rural villagers rather than the actual cities themselves. But that feels like a bit too much of a stretch, and being a chaos unit seems much more likely.
I mean, it could be Blades of Khorne. Could be. Probably not. But it could be Blades of Khorne. They've got the Blood Reavers. There's definitely lots of kind of similarities, at least from the silhouette, to the Blood Reavers and the sort of armor, etc. So, I mean, Blood Reavers, the miniatures as they are currently, don't have like shoulder pads or anything, though. But then, again, obviously, cavalry might approach things a little differently. Yeah, I don't know. It's a chaos something or other on a horse, as far as I can tell. But cool to see. I mean, obviously, this year will be a big year for Age of Sigmar. AOS 4 should be a pretty meaningful release. So excited to see what's yet to come, I suppose. I hear lots of Skaven. That's what they say, isn't it?
But as we talked about in the Old World section, that's the going rumour. for AOS, and I wouldn't be surprised at all because they're literally the oldest and most out of date faction in AOS.
Them are the Beastmen.
Yeah, I feel like Beastmen have at least had something though, and they're not.
They've had a hero on foot.
Well, that's all Skaven's had either. So, but I feel like Skaven's a much more like larger and fleshed out range.
Yeah, Skaven got a bit of love during the end times. They got a couple of units in the end time period. So they got the big
guys with the
big demon rat thing. Yeah, the horned rat or whatever it was, and then they also got the dudes with guns for arms and stuff. Yeah. And they got quite a good range refresh at the end of 8th edition because it was Skaven versus High Elves, wasn't it? So I think they're riding higher than Beastmen. I think Beastmen basically got like a few more Minotaurs or something at the end of 8th ed, and then beyond that they've not really seen much love. Going on with the model theme though, we still got celebrate this year's store anniversary with a Fire Slayer and Tau Empire Ethereal. So we've got a Tau Empire Ethereal mini, which I think is pretty good. I mean,
I think they're both great. I like them both. I think they're both pretty stunning. Nice that it's not sort of generic Space Marines, and I think they've been doing quite a good job for the last few years of not doing Space Marines, and that they've sort of expanded their repertoire. I'm only gutted that I didn't actually manage to get hold of last year's Cadron Overlords store anniversary, the one where he's holding like the ship.
Oh, really? You didn't get it?
I was hoping to get it because I really like the model, and I have illusions that one day I will have time to do a second AOS army and that it would be Cadron Overlords. So I'd have just wanted to pick him up for that future time. Because I did manage to get, I think he's called Jacob Bugman's, which was the new version of Bugman in AOS. I think I got him off of eBay for that one-time future when I do the project. I've got him as a cool special character because I wanted to do it all themed around the Bugman's Brewers because that's what I had a lot of in fantasy days. So so that's a bit disappointing. I missed out on that store anniversary miniature. Maybe I'll be able to pick it up on eBay.
There's always eBay, mate.
I know, but eBay is always very expensive for my taste for those kind of store anniversary minis. But it is what it is, I guess. But these ones look great. I think the Fire Slayer one looks really awesome as well. Even though Fire Slayers, as you have just stated, already have plenty of heroes on foot. They don't really need any more. But I guess this will just be an alternate build. It won't be a named character. It won't appear in the Codex, not Codex Battle Tome. It will just be like an alternative sculpt, likewise with Ethereal. So that'll be quite cool.
Yeah, I mean, the Fire Slayer looks amazing. I mean, the gilded key, he is covered in keys. His axe is a key.
His axe is a key, which is very cool. Yeah. Here's the thing. I think a lot of the Fire Slayers just look a bit silly, and actually this one really hits it home how good they could be. And I saw, because when they first came out, obviously I was a huge dwarf fan back in fantasy. So when Fire Slayers first, I heard the idea of them, I was like, oh, brilliant. These seem amazing. But then once you saw the range, I was just a bit disappointed by the models not being that great. Whereas this guy I think is amazing. And I think if they all look like him, that would be phenomenal.
I think that's the wild thing, isn't it, about the Fire Slayers? Because literally Games Workshop, as far as I can tell, what's the most popular dwarf we have? Troll Slayers. Cool. How do we make them better? Fire. Great. And then literally, to be honest with you, I think knocked it out of the park with a lot of the miniatures. It's just the Magnadroth that literally lets it down. It's like if that mini was great, if that was like as good as the Maw Crusher, I feel like you'd have more Fire Slayer players.
That's true. I think the Endless Spell that's like the Lava Beast looks better than
so good.
That's really cool. I sort of wish they were the Magnadroths that they're riding. And as you say, I think, they took a quintessential dwarf concept of Troll Slayers and then just dialed it up to John Blanche 11 And that's what we got. And I think concept-wise, that's great. That's kind of what they did with the Nighthawk. They took the Khan Wraith and the Tomb Banshee and were like, how can we turn this into a faction? And they did. So there's been some great like home runs with kind of coming up with really unique spins on sort of old fantasy tropes of like dwarves and elves and such. So yeah, but I think a couple of models. I think some of the infantry looks a bit silly in terms of like the posing, and just the design isn't quite great. But that's just me.
Yeah, and the ethereal, the invocation, whatever it is, the using of the elements. It's kind of interesting that this ethereal has the ability to be sculpted with, different elements. You can, either have it, splishing some water around, or carrying its big pile of turds, or lighting fire to things, or blowing a big fart. It's all right. I mean, again,
I didn't actually notice that. So yeah, that's kind of cool.
It's kind of cool, yeah. I mean, look, ethereal minis, at least at the moment, to the best of my understanding, are all pretty terrible. So to get an actual really cool ethereal mini on foot is a step in the right direction, I feel, for the Tau players. Because I mean, I'm just frantically heading over to the Warhammer 40,000 section of the new, rather tedious Warhammer website, and looking to see what other ethereal minis they are. And I mean, this compared to the old style ethereal, I mean, this is just loads better. I feel like almost every Tau player needs to get out and get this.
Was there one floating on a drone? I don't know if he was like a special character, but I think
that's the only ethereal. That's the only ethereal you can get now, is the one floating on a drone. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, they got that one on the chair, but he doesn't look like he's available to buy anymore.
Okay.
And there was the one with the abs. You remember him? The Tau ethereal with the abs?
Not sure. No, I can't. I mean, it doesn't stand out.
Well, I would if you saw him. He's got like a stick, and he's sort of like doing like a kind of like devil horns at a metal gig type pose, and he's got big abs, big six pack.
Been working out.
He has been working out, absolutely, which I suppose is an oddity for the ethereals, but there you go. But no, I think this ethereal looks great. I think, again, that is a mini that I suppose if you could pick up and put in a drawer and resell in 4 years' time, you'd probably do all right. I imagine there'll be many a Tau player wanting to get their hands on that when they can't.
Yes, unless of course they do a similar sculpt, because the Blade Guard champion was, or no, he was like company champion, right? He was, but looked like Blade Guard. He was a store anniversary mini, I want to say. I could be wrong on that, but I think he was.
He was, yeah.
Or he was, or maybe he was event exclusive. He might have been that year's event exclusive mini. I think that's what it was. But then obviously they've done a very similar model within the company. What are they called? Not Company of Heroes.
Company Command.
Company Command Squad.
Heroes.
Yeah. Company Command Squad.
Yeah, you say that though, but if you could, you'd get the anniversary one, or the
yes, because it's better, and I have got it, so I because that was great. You're right. So what you're basically encouraging is everyone to basically buy these as an investment and then sell them to other people at a much higher rate in a couple of years' time.
I mean, it's a very incremental investment. I mean, I imagine this thing will cost you probably 27 to 30 quid to buy today, and then you'll be able to sell it for, I don't know, probably 60 quid in the future. I imagine there's better investments.
It depends. I've seen some of the previous ones for different factions, and I think it depends between, which factions may be more popular potentially, but some go for anything from 50 quid to like 100 quid if it's a really rare one. So yeah, they can go up in value, but I think it's a bit of a punt onto which ones will be popular and which ones won't be, and you won't necessarily know.
Well, right now you can get that Inquisitor that was the Star Anniversary for £53, it seems. Your guy that you wanted with the ship, £35.
Oh, a positive bargain.
Exactly, there you go. What else have we got here? Any others? Lots of people selling pins. Oh, Sergeant Ripper Jackson, £41. Space Marine Sergeant Jovan. You remember old Jovan? He was the one with the chainsaw in the Orc's
yes.
head. That's £60.
Okay.
Bear in mind, these aren't the prices people have actually bought them for. This is just what people are hoping to get for them.
Yes, true. So probably £5 to £10 cheaper then.
Yeah, indeed.
Actual sold price. Yeah.
Hang on a second here. I never seen this one before. There's an Auric War Clans store anniversary mini called Gut Ripper Boss. Oh no!
Have you not got him?
Oh my god! And they want £95 for him.
Ooh, well, that's why he's a rarity.
Oh my god! I didn't know this existed.
Well, it might have predated your fascination with Aurochs then.
It definitely did. It definitely did. Oh well, I'll just have to let that simmer down in my brain.
Yeah.
That Katachan Colonel, the one that definitely isn't a rip-off from Predator.
Yeah.
That's someone's asking about £80 for that there.
I think it went for a couple of hundred really early days when it was because people were just mad to get hold of it. So I guess once the initial interest has waned, the people with the big bucks have all bought it already, so therefore the prices tend to go down a bit.
I think that's the problem with that one in particular, though. I think that one was a lot of speculative buying, and now it's just gotten to a point where people are like, "Oh, I'm going to try and sell that now," and it's like, "Oh, no one cares." It's like, "Oh, good." Or not, no one cares, but like people don't want to spend hundreds of pounds on it anymore because why would you?
True. Wait until they read.
I mean, there seems to be a lot of them. I'll be honest with you, it's the most consistently listed miniature that I'm seeing here. Like it pops up all over the place. Like
probably because there was that famous one being sold for like £200 on eBay, like really early doors that went around on social media that someone was sort of balmy enough to pay for it. And I think, as you say, a lot of people were then like, "Oh, I'm going to jump on this bandwagon and try and buy it," and then to sell it on.
We need Post Malone to come on and offer someone $20 million for it or whatever it was, like he did for the One Ring in Magic the Gathering.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Although it wasn't like $20 million. I don't want to sort of, inflate the situation. But it was an amount of money that wasn't it wasn't small, it's fair to say.
True.
But there you go. There's store anniversary miniatures. I suppose the last thing, just to mention it, is they also brought back Black Reach, which is interesting. Those of you who don't know that off the top of your head, that was the 4th edition box set for Warhammer 40,000, pitting the forces of... No, it wasn't Black Reach, was it? Goodness gracious, no. It's the Battle for Macragge, isn't it?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yes, Macragge, not Black Reach. Black Reach was the 5th edition box set, don't you know, Phil? Which I've heard some say best edition.
Oh. I've never heard anyone say that in my life.
I know, no one's ever made that argument consistently. But no, you can buy the Battle of Macragge.
Although I believe our good buddy Sean did some sleuthing, and he reckons you get half of the original Gene Stealers, but you get twice the number of them. So there were like 2 sprues, and they basically doubled up on one of the sprues, so you're getting more duplicates than you did originally, which is kind of interesting, if that was actually the case.
Yeah.
But that's what he seems to reckon, and I trust Sean. He's a knowledgeable chap.
Yeah, I trust Sean entirely on that side of things. I think the reality of this is that you're basically... If you're buying this, it's because you really want that scatter terrain and you really want the pilot. Like, that really is it, isn't it? Like,
Or you're just really nostalgic for the miniatures. It sort of feels like
True.
they did an old world on you just before the old world came out by saying people of a certain age like old minis and are willing to pay brand new prices for them. So here you go for 40k. I think it was like literally a week before the old world got announced on pre-order, which I thought was interesting.
And what's interesting as well, it's so weird going back and seeing like Marines on 25mm bases. Like, again, you just sort of really... I know I've probably said this before, but I was having this conversation with Richie before, and he was talking about how old games of like 6th edition, when he started playing, felt bigger in scale. And he said, it must have been like the 6x4 boards. That must have been what it was. I was like, well, yeah, that, and the fact that every model was on a 25mm base. And he's like, no, what, Space Marines? I was like, yeah. Like, it's like, go back and look at the photos, your Thousand Sun, rubric Marines.
Yeah, they're all over
25mm bases.
Yeah, they're all overhanging the base and stuff like that a lot of time.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's interesting looking back at that. But the only thing that's sort of weirdly weird about this now is when you look at it and go, okay, so it's the 4th edition box set. But obviously they're not going to give you the rules for 4th edition and all the rest of it. But then they've obviously got the old base sizes. So, if you wanted to use these miniatures in...
You have to buy bases.
40k. Yeah. Because, again, the bases, as far as I remember, were included on the sprues. So they were, like, push fit, and they were just, on it. So...
Yeah, I sort of feel like if they had a bit more time and effort, maybe they could have done, like, a mini game that was a bit of a nostalgic trip down an older edition and just gone, here's a game that you can play with these minis that has some old mechanics, so it's not particularly so it's like a game in and of itself that you could play. That would be that would have been an interesting thing they could have done for this, rather than just tell you miniatures that, as you say, aren't kind of even like match play legal. I mean, that because they're on the wrong base sizes, for example.
Yeah, it's an interesting pitch. I mean, at the end of the day, that scatter terrain is really cool. I definitely think that people will be picking up for that, and I do, from a nostalgic perspective, really like seeing it. But like the weird thing is about like these tactical Marines in particular is that, like, again, it's a weird one because when you see these tactical Marines, there is a sort of nostalgia for them, but not in the same way as the second ed tactical Marines. Like, those were such like specific tactical Marines for a specific box set. And they were so dramatically different from the metal sculpts that were also available at the time. But like the problem is with these tactical Marines is that even at the time in 4th edition, when this box came out, those of us who were playing Warhammer 40,000 at the time would have picked this up just because we would have picked it up. But the thing is that, like, even then we knew that these tactical Marines weren't very good versus what we actually had at the time, because the multi-part plastics were just so much more dynamic and interesting. So yeah, because these things had notoriously like bad mold lines and all sorts of things on them, and yeah, they were. This is definitely from a different era. So again, like, I appreciate nostalgia, but like, I kind of feel like if you want like a nostalgia for like the old 4th edition side of things, you might as well just go out and buy, the old. I mean, if you're looking for Space Marine specifically, or even the NID stuff, just go buy old NID models.
Yes. Here's the thing: I could imagine Tyranid players might want it for the Spore Mines, just because these are the kind of classic design, whereas the new ones are a bit too like sort of smooth. Like,
yeah, that's true.
The weird balloon heads look a lot different, and these I actually think look a bit better. But yeah, they are old minis. Although I presume these were the existing Termagant models until just recently, right?
Well, no, these were different from the main ones. Although I think they were actually built with the same kind of sculpts in the sense, but they were obviously on different sprues. So,
okay,
yeah. But no, it's interesting to see. I mean, again, it's weird, right? Because obviously, I've already in this podcast spoken very fondly of what they're doing with the old world, and the old world definitely features some janky old minis. But again, they're kind of like, again, without being ridiculous about it, I think they definitely have passed into that time where, like, certainly things like the Tomb King stuff, for example, where they are just sort of like, they are, yeah, sure, like the horses for like the Tomb Kings are a bit dumb, those weird skeleton horses, but
they're iconic
to me anyway. Yeah, exactly. Like there's a reason why for me anyway that's cool. These guys, I just remember playing, 4th edition 40k and being like, I would never field that tactical squad. Like I owned it. I think I'd even painted it, but if I had the choice, I'd use any other tactical squad model I had, because I'd just be like, oh, I don't really like how these look.
I think there's like been some odd stages. So obviously you had like metal miniatures to start off with, then you transitioned across to plastic, and then you've had different iterations of those plastic sculpts. And I think there's probably a point where I think a lot of people like the metal sculpts looked better than the first generation plastic sculpts. But then I think some of the later sculpts, so a lot of the Tomb Kings and the Bretonnians, especially things like, the Yeoman, which I think admittedly are some metal sculpts, and metal and plastic, they're like the second iteration of Bretonnians, and they look better than the original, like, sort of one piece plastic ones that you got is it like in the 5th ed box. But and I think similar for dwarves. I've got a lot of the metal ones; they look great. I've got some of the very original. Actually, maybe let's say that the plastic ones don't look great. But sometimes I think some of the later plastic ones, even then, don't really stand up to the test of time and aren't that great either. I think there's sometimes you kind of go in like a sort of circle of, this is great, this is bad, this is great again, oh, and then this one's bad. In their sort of life cycle of design. It's a sort of potluck sometimes, I think, in terms of when a unit's going to look great or not. And maybe time also has an impact on that. Because I think, probably when Primaris Intercessors first came out, a lot of people were like, oh, I hate them, or I don't like them because they're different. But now we're all like, yeah, they're quintessentially iconic Space Marines. And you look at the older stuff and you'd be like, oh, yeah, not as good.
It's weird though. For me, they're not, but like I do understand why people love them. But for me, I remember when they did an article in Warhammer Community where they talked about like Firstborn Marines, and they showed this picture of like a Crimson Fist army that was all Firstborn Marines, and I was just like immediately like, oh yeah, that's proper, because like when you see like those old school like Firstborn Marine armies, there was just this sort of basic kind of utilitarian function to them, where they were all basically, highly trained killing machines in the same suits of armor, armed with different stuff. And I kind of liked that more than the modern version of like Primaris, where they're all like specialists with special gear for their specific function.
And different armor and stuff like that. No, I get that. That's fair enough.
Yeah. But anyway, look, all that being said, cool that they are diving back into the well and continuing to give us cool options, and seeing McCrag available again was cool. But to your point, Phil, I would have loved if they had actually supported it with like a rule set that would have kind of, or even just a little mission set, done it as like an introduction thing for people if they wanted to get in and try something different. But again, these are let's be real. What this is I don't know when GW's financial year runs to. It might go they might go annually, or they might go like April to March, but it feels like this is just potential like padding out some numbers at the start of the year conversation, where they're like, get some more money in.
Yeah, quite likely.
Go to the well. What can we re-release? How can we nostalgia bait our fan base?
Yeah,
kind of vibe.
Yeah. I sort of feel like it's just Games Workshop going, oh well, if the specialist design team are doing nostalgia, well, we can do that as well. As
yes,
as a different division within the same company, and riding that horse. So Yeah, I mean, I'd love it if they did more of these kind of made to order, like plastic kits. You know, RTB01, the classic first Space Marines would be great to see. Although, to be fair, they're quite cheap to pick up on eBay still, or secondhand sites. But a lot of people love those kind of things, and people would just love like the original packaging, like the old style boxes with the artwork on, and to have those kind of kits on sprues. And just to have the experience of building it again for the first time, or being able to build it for the first time because they never got it in the first time round. So I think allowing people to purchase the thing they really wanted when they was a kid but could never afford, but now can. Like I would love the old Marauder Giants, which I presume we'd never actually be able to see because it was part of the Marauder sub-brand, which I think technically belongs to another company now. So I don't think we'd ever see that personally. But that, to me, was a quintessential giant mini that I just always saw in White Dwarf in all like the battle reports and articles and photography. And even though I never collected an army that had that I could buy it for, so I think that's why I never bought it. But deep down, I'm always like, I'd love to own that if I could. So yeah, if they bought something back like that, I'd be all over it, basically.
Amazing, man. All right, cool. Well, I reckon that'll probably do, buddy. Thank you very much, and obviously thank you to you for listening. That has been episode 171 of the Warhammer 40,000 podcast. Cheers very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry.